Vanessa, I think we can call the meeting to order and do a roll call. And do we have any AB 2449 people? I don't think we do.
We do not.
Okay.
I'll start with the roll call. Diane Bailey. Here. Stephen Booker.
Present.
Joseph Pen.
Here.
Michael Clausen. Kathleen Goforth. Here. Melee Kimberly. Aurelio Pizar. Gail Lee. Here. Don McKenna.
Here.
Jason Mendelson.
Yes, here.
Cheryl Shaw. Remy Tan. Robert Whitehair.
Here.
Thank you.
Great. Before we get going further, I would like to take this time to ask for public comment of items that are not on the agenda. And please raise your hand and we'll try to, we have a big agenda, so we'll try to give 2 minutes. I don't see anybody online other than Jen. So let me go. All right, go ahead, Robert.
I think he was.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Robert.
Whoever wants to go, go ahead.
Hey,
Robert.
before you.
I want to thank staff for all the hard work they did at the Pacifica Pelican Fest last week at a booth. I staffed that. I just want to encourage all the rest of you. So mostly I think have already done it. That is a great opportunity to talk to people about the climate and how that relates to municipal clean energy. You show people the bill, say that's climate. Oh, yeah, man. People just don't get it. So thank you. We got overrun for a while. I was surprised with that many people. It was a good thing. Thank you, staff, for doing it. And encourage the rest of you to do it. I think Joseph's done it. I think everybody's room's done it before. And I encourage you to keep doing it because I really like it. I was tired of it. So thank you staff.
Thank you, sir, coming. So, thank you so much for coming in.
Steven.
How's it going?
Yes.
On that way. So what I have is, I was reading an article recently in our government affairs. When I say R, I mean the IBWs. And it was talking about Colorado, bill that designates nuclear as a key renewable. And it seems like, nuclear is a bad word around here, but this also seems to be a greenhouse gas, and Colorado overwhelmingly supports nuclear development, and we believe that to meet our future power needs, nuclear power has to be on the table. And there's also similar legislation that was passed in Michigan, but I didn't have time to print that one out before I left for the meeting. But I thought this was a very interesting article as well as the other one. If you guys are more interested, I'll send the other article out as well. But I think this is something that needs to be talked about a little more, especially when we talk about our portfolio and meeting our demands for energy that's greenhouse gas free. That's just my opinion.
Thank you.
But thank you for that time.
Thank you for that. Can we enter this into the minutes or something? Is that appropriate?
Yeah, so
Okay.
whenever we receive a public comment, it gets linked in the minutes.
Okay, cool. I meant the document too, yeah?
Oh, yeah, we can put that online.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Okay, any other public comments? Yeah. Go ahead.
Super brief. I happened on the Peninsula Clean Energy website the other day and noticed the lower rate plus renewable energy comparison on the front page. And I just want to say kudos to the marketing team. It looks amazing and very well timed. So website looks great. We've always known that, but this comparison is coming at exactly the right time. So very well, and thank you.
Great. Thank you. Any other public comment from people in the room or online? Any?
No,
No?
we're
Okay.
gonna go get some dinner.
Yeah, I mean, there's food in the kitchen too. Okay, great. Thank you. All right, next is could I get a motion to set the agenda and approve the consent agenda items?
Set the agenda and with the consent agenda items.
Thank you, Kathleen. Could I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Robert. Can we have the vote? Can we do it? Please.
So we're all in person, so I don't have to do an individual roll call.
Oh, great.
So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, the motion passes unanimously.
Great, thank you. Next is my report. I'll be very quick. I want to echo what Robert said. I got to volunteer, Kathleen and I did the Menlo Park Celebrate the Earth Day event, and I hadn't done that in a while, and I was very reinvigorated. There were a ton of people. It felt great to talk to them. I felt useful because we were talking about things we knew, both for the organization and just like how we do stuff ourselves. And the only not complaint, the only observation I had is there were so many people who were not from our jurisdiction. And that was interesting. That happened, I think, a couple of years ago, another event I was at, it was like, where are you from? They're like, I'm from Europe. And I'm like, okay, cool. Well, you go. This was at least San Jose, Monterey around, but it was just interesting. I also will report back that, I presented our minutes from last month to the board. There was no request for feedback or needing to opine on there, other than you should check out the minutes from both our meeting and the board meeting. At the board meeting, they had a very lively discussion on the merits of, everyone here who knows the numbers better than me, 504.
540.
540, excuse me. And you can always go and look it up on the YouTube of PCE for our meetings and all the public meetings and get to hear their opinion. And then you can maybe form your own. I don't know that I'm any closer to an opinion after that than I was before, but I'm feeling much more informed. And that is it for me. Is there any public comment on my report or any staff comment? Oh, excuse me. Very importantly, we have a huge agenda. Please be strategic in your comments. Think ahead about what you'd like to say. Keep it succinct. And also remember, when the staff is presenting, try to keep it to questions that are relevant to what they're presenting, and save and write down your comments for after, so we can have a lively discussion after that. And everyone, please feel free to speak up and comment when you are so moved. Are there any public comments on my report?
It was awesome.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving on. Our next report is the recommendation on distributed energy resource management system. You should have received those slides this week, but I'm sure we'll get that here as well. And Yana Kopychuk Landu, did I get that right at all?
Yeah, no, you did, totally.
It's
Yeah,
all because
Kopychuk
Kirsten
Landu.
phonetically got it for me, so I apologize.
It's amazing.
All right, thank you. Please
Thank you.
proceed.
Thank you, Vanessa. Good to see everybody. Jana Kopychuk Lande, I'm Associate Director of Innovation Strategy here at PCE. And talking today about an RFP, a request for proposal that we did for what we call customer demand flexibility services. The goal was to procure a distributed energy resource management system, or DERMS platform. And I'm going to talk about what that is and why we're recommending approval of the contract with the selected vendor. Just wanted to quickly introduce Peter Levitt, who you all probably know. He's our Senior Manager of DERs and the programs team, and we're working on this together. All right, that's the agenda. Just provide a little context, describe what a DERMS platform is, describe how we did the RFP, and then our requesting or recommending approval of a contract with Lunar Energy. We're going to talk a little bit about who Lunar Energy is. They are a DERMS platform provider. We're going to talk a little bit about the contract structure and next steps. So, as you all know, we were here with you last month and when we talked about the PCE strategic plan and the DER plan. So if you recall, we've talked about the PCE strategic plan several times over the last 6 months. But under the PCE strategic plan, we had several goals, or what we call DER strategic policies. And the third strategic policy was specifically referring to further fostering the development of distributed energy resources, or DERs. The goal is to accelerate the development of carbon-free DERs. And one way to do that is via the creation of a virtual power plant. Before I go there, though, just again, a little bit of context setting. So I'm kind of going from the top down. We have a PCE strategic plan that's identifying what PCE should be doing in terms of goals and activities over the next 5 years. We identified as strategic policy number 3 that we want to foster DERs, distributed energy resources. And so we wrote a distributed energy resource plan that we brought to the CAC and to the board last month. And that plan outlined 7 different goals that we want to reach over the next 5 years, or endeavor to reach. We talked about that last month, so I'm not going to go into all the details, but the third goal was that we want to develop a virtual power plant, or VPP, that aggregates 10 megawatts of dispatchable capacity from customer-sided resources in PCE service area to the benefit of the customer, PCE, and the grid. There's a lot of there, and we're going to talk through all of that. But the idea is we're talking about behind the meter resources, customer-sided resources that we want to aggregate under a software platform that we then can dispatch and control and manage, that it benefits the LSE, the customer, and the grid.
What's an LSE?
Oh, yes, thank you. See, I knew, I was trying to be so good about the abbreviations. It's a load serving entity, so a CCA, a utility, an energy provider. So yes, please interrupt me when I start to talk about abbreviations. Yes,
Well, I have a question on something else. Can you
Sure.
take a minute?
Yeah.
You said, can you go back to the previous line? It says 10. I mean, I should know the answer to this. What's the total load?
I know, I saw your email. I'm gonna try to address your questions.
Okay.
I love it, Robert, that you send us emails before the meeting. So Robert has shared a few questions with us. One of them was, how does that compare to total load? I could not find it right now. Do you know what our total peak load is?
Yeah, our peak load, varies by season, so, and year, so it should be around 500 to 700 megawatts. So while that sounds like this is a small amount, compared to, the 500 to 700 megawatts, really, the most expensive load is really at the surface, at the top there. Yeah.
So it's like the old avoided cost.
Yeah, it's a high avoided cost.
Good question.
Thank you.
So what is a distributed energy resource management system, or I'm gonna start calling it DERMS, because it is a mouthful. So we have that goal that I just described, that we want to create a VPP, and the system that you use to control the devices under a VPP or a virtual power plant is called a DERMS platform. A DERMS is the software system that monitors, controls, and optimizes these customer-sided DERs to provide, again, that reliable, clean, and cost-effective power. So we're talking about we call them behind the meter DERs or customer-sided DERs. So everything that a customer may install that is a load flexibility technology. You see the pictures here, it's from smart control thermostats to electric vehicles to heat pump water heaters, solar plus storage. And then for commercial customers, the graphic on the left bottom is indicating that that's a building energy management system. So for larger commercial customers, you manage all different systems under on the site under a so-called building energy management system, or BEMS. The idea is that the question is like, how does this relate to PCE, right? The idea is that we already are running a lot of programs that we call upfront incentive programs. So we're incentivizing the installation of a device. We're encouraging people to install these types of devices that I just talked to on their site. So we're talking about solar plus storage, we're talking about heat pump water heaters. And in the future, we're talking about EVs, and in the future, we may also be doing things with smart control thermostats, or we're already doing work on heat pump HVAC. So the idea is that to begin with that DERMS platform, we would integrate the resources that were installed under our existing programs, and mostly that's the PCE Solar Plus Battery Savings Program. That's our low income solar plus storage program, and the GovPD program, which is our solar plus storage program for municipal customers, and the heat pump water heaters installed under our home upgrade program. Those are like the core first technologies that we want to start working with and integrate under the DERMS platform. So the idea again is we're already helping customers to install a heat pump water heater or a solar plus storage under these programs. We also want to make them kind of dispatchable and usable in the long run, and not just kind of drop them after install, quote unquote. We're going to start doing that with our existing programs, but then we also have the vision to create new programs under this DERMS platform with new providers and new vendors. Yeah, any question?
Can you just delineate between solar and battery savings program and residential solar and storage program? Is one of them the SCHIP where we connect people?
Correct,
Okay.
yeah, exactly. So the solar plus battery savings program is the specific low income focused program where we're connecting them with SCHIP incentives, and therefore the customer gets the installation completely for free. The residential solar and storage program, I believe, is today on the agenda, maybe? Yeah. And so we're going to talk about that. That's a general market, well, Rafael it's an overarching program, kind of our future strategy that expands to both low income and general market customers. Right. Any more questions on this? This is just a quick background. The point was when we were starting to think about doing this RFP is like, we in San Mateo County, especially in Los Banos to an extent too, we have so many of these behind the meter resources already installed in our service area, and there's so much adoption happening every day that we should be able to take advantage of these resources and make sure that, especially during the peak hours, peak hours are typically from 4 to 9 p.m. They start to shift a little bit later, 5 to 10 p.m. But that during that time, the load, we can help reduce the load and stop the grid from being stressed, basically. So our goal is to both incentivize or encourage the installation of new DERs, but also come up with ideas and programs and initiatives to integrate existing DERs in our service area under that DERS platform. And this basically just says we have a lot of these devices, they have a lot of capacity. It's also kind of important to note that even if there's a lot of capacity in some of these devices, you cannot use all of that for load shift, for example, for solar and storage. Some customers may want to just keep a portion of their battery always charged in case the grid goes down. It's called a resiliency reserve. But there's a portion of that capacity that you can use for load shift, and we're thinking that load shift potential is around 30 megawatts in San Mateo County. And we're trying to get to around 10 megawatts in the next 5 years.
So if I understand this correctly, I got a text from that person who makes the batteries, whose
Like-
name I won't use.
Yeah,
I want to know if I want to be part of it. I don't want to be part of that.
okay.
So will you be sending out texts to customers or emails saying, will you be part of the system and here's the advantage and we'll buy your power? Is that how this is going to work?
It's a good question. I think all these details will be determined in particular programs. So we don't have developed, what we currently have is our existing PCE programs, the home upgrade program, the solar battery savings program. So I can speak to those and then I will answer your question. Under our existing program, like the solar battery savings program, a customer agrees or gets a free solar plus battery system from us. And when.
For low income.
For low income, under that program, it's only for low income customers. And so when they sign our participation agreement, they agree that we are allowed, in return, we're allowed to dispatch that resource under the terms.
So a fair trade.
Seems like a fair trade, right? That's what I think. I mean, some customers may still not like it, but then you don't have to participate. It's your choice, right? That is generally our approach will be that if we're giving you a free installation of a device and spending a lot of incentives to enable that, which is mostly geared at low income customers, we will require customers to allow us to control that device. And we're making sure that this will benefit the customer too. It's not just, the benefit of
Well,
us.
people are already starting to ask me that question, so now I have an answer.
Yeah.
That's tough. Thank you.
Then I have to say, so that's under our existing programs where we provide incentives. There is a good question that you're asking is like, how can we encourage folks to, they have an existing battery that didn't get an incentive from us. How can we encourage them to participate under the DERMS? And that is not something we've answered yet. So that's where we're going to talk about when we're thinking about developing new programs. And I'm going to talk about timeline a little bit more. And when we're developing new programs, we will have these conversations.
And just to be clear, the numbers that are here are and the total universe of what's available, not just the ones that have been the result of
Correct.
incentives.
Yes, correct, yeah.
Just a quick question back to the previous slide. Under buildings, you have appliances. I assume that's rebates and on-bill finance, 0% loan program. But under electric vehicles, you don't have don't we have a rebate for electric vehicles?
Do we still?
For you.
For use to
We
be.
do.
So why wouldn't that be included?
In my understanding, it is one of these, we're just paying like a few $1,000s, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I
It's just
think,
not meaningful.
exactly, our principle is a little bit, if we're basically if we're paying for the entire device. Like we're giving you $27,000 to install solar plus storage, you give us the right to dispatch. If we're just giving you a $2,000 incentive for a $25,000, $30,000 vehicle, we don't feel like we have that necessarily,
Okay.
that right to control so I think for these customers, it would be more, this is the idea of like, in future programs, we may offer you the opportunity to opt in, but we're not gonna opt you in automatically.
Yeah, because it just seems like electric vehicles offer a lot of opportunity for this type of VPP program, so It
Yeah.
seems like it's something that should be considered, but maybe not demanded.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that is definitely a conversation we're gonna have this summer, how we're gonna deal. And the same concept applies under our appliance incentive offering. We're giving customers a $2,000 incentive for a heat pump water heater. I don't know if I'm quoting the numbers correctly at this point, but like, let's say we give them a smaller incentive for a heat pump water heater. We're not requiring them to enroll under the DERMS platform. We want to make that available as an option, but not a requirement. Any other questions?
You have water heater in there, and I was wondering how that is, because it doesn't generate any energy. I was thinking using that water heater as storage.
Yeah.
Or energy storage. is that what
Exactly.
it is?
The idea would be that you are trying not to heat your water during the peak times, so from 4 to 9 PM. So what you would do is you would preheat your water, let's say from 2 to 4 when there's a lot of solar.
Hmm.
And then you would, there's like settings, there's control mechanisms how to do that, and then you would try to not heat your water heater during the 4 to 9 PM window.
Couldn't you just incentive that by the rate structure?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's an opportunity to either do that via rates or via DERMS platform. That's a very, what do you want to call it, almost like an ethical question. And I think there is already time of use rates,
Yeah,
right?
that's what I mean.
So I think that for me, and I'm happy if Peter wants to chime in too, for me, the time of use rate is like the base of what you should always do. There's still a lot of people who don't shift their behavior because of time of use. For EVs, we actually have seen, Philip has done analysis, we've done reports where there's actually a lot of response. A lot of customers or EV owners are already not charging from 4 to 9 PM during the TOU times because they know they're on a TOU rate. So how much additional load shifting there really is for EVs with a DERMS platform is debatable. Maybe the benefit then is that instead of, all these EV that don't charge from 4 to 9, they all start charging at 9, and then we see a spike at 9. Maybe what you can do with the DERMS platform, instead of them all charging at 9, you can say 5 charge at 9, 5 charge at 9:30, 5 charge at 12. Or maybe they charge all from 12 to 2 PM when we have a lot of solar. So you can maybe do more kind of fine tuning like that. So for me, the DERMS platform is a fine tuning of what rates can already do. I don't know if you have anything to add. Yes. All right, just talking about the RFP real quickly, the mechanics. We ran that RFP or that request for proposal for customer demand flexibility services jointly with SVCE. And this was a question that Robert had already asked. So when we originally structured the RFP, we had this vision that we would, under part 1, procure 5 megawatts of existing capacity in our service area. And we asked providers to bring that capacity to us. So that is the opposite of what we're doing, integrating our own programs. But we said, okay, providers, tell us if you can bring capacity to us. If you have control over a program or a device, and you can bring capacity to us. Under part 2, we then said, in addition to that, we also want to work together with you to develop an additional 25 megawatts of capacity in PC service area over the next 5 years. So the idea there is we develop this DERMS platform and we integrate both PCE's existing program and new programs that we would develop in the future together to grow that capacity and these resources under the VPP. So again, we would do, new programs for heat pump water heaters, for EVs, for solar plus storage, et cetera, to get to that capacity.
What's the 5 and 25 connect to the 10?
To the 10, it's a really good question. So 2 things. The 25 is not just, when we set that goal, it wasn't dispatchable capacity. So when we basically, the short answer is we had lofty goals. And then when we realized, when we're really looking into what capacity we can shift. So there's a difference, like a solar plus storage system, let's say a residential battery, just to give you a sense, it's 15 kilowatt hours. That's just how they rate it when they come out of the lab. And then you have a tiny bit of efficiency losses. And then usually what you do, you set a certain reserve or backup margin away for resiliency purposes. You say, okay, I'm going to take a third of that and set it aside for resiliency backup in case the grid goes down. And then you say, I want to dispatch that battery during 2 hours, from 5 to 7, because that's going to be my most impacted hours. And then in the end, if I do my math right, you get around 5 megawatts of dispatchable capacity. So there's a difference between what's the dispatchable capacity and the nameplate capacity. And basically the 25 megawatts was nameplate, and now we're talking about dispatchable to be more specific.
Right.
It will be more or less the same. It's more or less the same goal.
What do you mean by nameplate? Is that saving?
Nameplate capacity is the capacity that it's rated. It's the rated capacity when a storage system comes out of the lab. That's what it's rated at.
Oh,
producing.
nameplate.
Nameplate, yeah. Yeah.
Can you explain the term market integrated?
Yeah. There are a few kind of detailed concepts in here. You can tell me to speed it up if I'm getting too long. But so I took this slide out because I felt like it was maybe a little bit too detailed, but basically I believe we talked about this last month. The concept of value stacking for behind the meter resources, and there is the core value for load serving entities like PCE is that these resources can, if we dispatch them during the peak hours, they can reduce our resource adequacy costs, RA costs. That can happen in 2 ways, either by integrating into the market, into the CAISO market directly, and that's called market integrated. So we basically establish our resource adequacy obligation, and then we dispatch these resources to meet that obligation. And that would happen through the power resources team. Alternatively, we can do a load modifying pathway where we modify our load ahead of time. So when we submit to the CEC our forecast and how much load we have, we say, instead of having all this load, our load is actually reduced because we have all these DERs that customers are dispatching. And then we have to only procure our RA to that lower level. And that's the load modifying pathway. So it's quite detailed, but that
That is RA.
resource adequacy. Just one of we have to provide energy, and so again, it gets really detailed, but it's just one of the things we have to provide as a load serving entity. Just quickly on the timeline, so we issued that RFP in September. We got 17 proposals, which is pretty stunning. 2 other CCAs have done this before us, San Diego and Ava, and they got all like 3 to 5 or 6 proposals. So there's definitely more momentum happening. We shortlisted 5, had interviews in December, came by end of January to our top 3, and then have been working since end of January with Lunar Energy on a contract that we're now bringing to you and the board for hopeful approval. Did you have a question?
Do you have a virtual pilot program, and are they using?
Yeah.
A vendor?
So MCE did it a little bit differently. So the San Diego and Ava that I mentioned, they did an RFP just like us. Put an RFP out there, they got a bunch of bids. MCE has had what they call a virtual power plant for many years, but it's a different approach. They won a grant, and the grant was, in short, it was about rehabbing a bunch of old buildings. And then I think there was 9 buildings initially, and those 9 buildings were integrated under a VPP, under a provider. And so now they're growing it, but their approach was just different. They just didn't run an RFP. They just started with those 9 homes, and now they're growing it.
But do they have a DERMS for that
They
program?
have a DERMS for those 9 homes, and now again, the 9 homes are expanding and they're
Okay.
using that DERMS platform, but yeah, they just didn't do an RFP.
So what is this Lunar Energy, the RFP winner? What are they, are they coordinating all of these?
Yeah, I'm gonna talk a little
Oh,
bit about
okay.
Lunar exactly, and then the contract structure exactly. So
Oh.
yeah, so we got 17 different providers offering us these DERMS services. Again, they're software service providers. They offer a software that can dispatch these resources. Lunar, and specifically their DERMS provider and a battery manufacturer, which is the second part, not too relevant here. They offer the grid share platform, so that's their software. It's called the grid share platform. And again, that provides this end-to-end DER engagement. They are originally from the UK, but have a local presence here in Mountain View and have been here in Mountain View for a long time. They are Ava Community Energy Storms provider. So again, Ava did a similar RFP. And they are mostly experienced in daily load shifting and these load modification programs. I just described that difference. Like they have not that as much experience with these KISO market integrated initiatives, but focusing mostly on load modification, which is in our core interest. You may all know that we're doing a Sunrun pilot, or have been doing that since 2021, right? Where we're doing this load modification approach. So what we liked about Lunar is that they have more than 100,000 devices under their control worldwide already. They focus mostly on residential customer engagement, and they focus on energy storage device integration. That was important to us. We wanted to work with a vendor who really understands energy storage systems and how they can provide benefit to a DERMS platform, because we really think that that's where the biggest value lies. EVs is complicated, heat pump water heaters has limited load shiftability. So we really think that at least in the near term, energy storage device integration is the most promising. And generally they were just, I have to say, great to work with, and just pleasant people, and seemed upfront and straightforward in their RFP process. Yeah.
You're buying a software, they're not actually buying components.
Correct.
You homeowner will still own the components, the assemblies, the rest of it, use the software.
It will depend on the what we call the upfront incentive program, or the initial energy program, who owns the system, right? Like under our, again, PCE solar battery savings
If
program,
you're putting up the money, you want to have.
it's actually someone else. It's like the developer owning the systems for the first 5 years, and then the then the customer. So it depends on kind of the financing structure of the thing, who owns it. But you're right, Lunar will not own it. Just quickly about the contract, and then I'll kind of tie it all together and explain, like, well, what does this all mean? So this has been a big contract. We did this at record time, because we have a regulatory and compliance requirement for our solar battery savings program. So again, just quick context, we are hopefully installing around 220, 230 solar plus storage system or standalone storage system at low-income customer homes. There is a requirement to get access to an SCHIP funding that we need to make that happen. You need to enroll in what's called a qualified demand response program. And our way to meet that requirement is to enroll these resources under the DERMS platform. So to be able to short of it is, it's a long story, but to make a long story short, to get access to these SCHIP incentives, we need to enroll these resources under our DERMS platform. So we had a lot of urgency in getting this contract defined and hopefully approved in this month.
So PCE got 220 of those. Does that like far exceed your expectations of how many you thought you'd get?
We were hoping to get 200, and we were like, fingers crossed. And we have 73, I believe, already approved. The other ones, the funding is coming out on June 2nd. We just got the update today. So we're sitting there, we're ready. We're sitting there with the remaining 130 and just waiting until the funding becomes available to go. It should work out.
Sounds like a successful program.
Yeah, I mean, fingers crossed. I don't want to jinx it.
225 watt, I'm sorry.
Solar plus storage systems under the or
Hardware.
it's hardware, yeah. It's solar plus storage. I think it's about 73 standalone storage, and then the rest 130 or something.
That's
140
220 free
Free.
solar and storage
Yeah.
system
for our customers.
for homeowners.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah,
This is the SCHIP
Yeah, that's the
program
SCHIP.
where PC Pro was hoping to get everything set up so they're ready to like push the button and then it opens
yeah,
up, right?
that's that one. Yeah, that's on June 2nd now.
Oh,
That push the button is on June 2nd.
Okay.
So yeah, pretty complex contract. I don't want to delve on too much detail, but the idea is we're doing a main services agreement, which is just an umbrella contract with the legal terms and conditions. Under that, we're having several scopes. It's 4 scopes. Scope 1 is really about the grid share platform delivery. It's the software platform. The technical details of how the software platform will work, what are the service fees, And what are the service level agreements? That's basically performance guarantees. There's a lot of abbreviations in this one, sorry, to make it fit. We're also establishing a budget, and then for scope 2, so the scope 2, 3, and 4 are kind of under the scope 1 and MSA. Scope 2 deals with integrating CCA programs, so PCEs programs, like the ones we talked about, this ESTRA program, the home upgrade program. Scope 3 is what is called a load modification agreement. This is the idea of the Sunrun contract and part 1 of the RFP that I described earlier, where we would tell Lunar, please bring us capacity. Instead of us bringing the capacity from our programs, you bring capacity to us. How would you do that? And they're gonna make a proposal and we're gonna pay them a price for that. And then under scope 4, we would work with Lunar and our partners to develop new programs. For example, we currently don't have a program for smart control thermostats. Or we don't really have an EV managed charging program right now. These are all things we could consider in the future. Importantly, only the MSA scope 1 and scope 2 are going to the board and to you now. Scope 3 and scope 4 will be determined later by the end of this year. It was too much to deal with now. And again, because of the urgency to do scope 2 for the so-called ESTRA program, we had to get the MSA scope 1 and scope 2 done. The rest will come later this year.
It goes to executive committee on Monday.
It goes to executive committee on Monday, exactly, and then to the board, hopefully on the 22nd, correct? Yep. And then just the last row there is just explaining that under each of these scopes, particularly scope 2, the CCA programs, and scope 4, there will be program-specific scopes. So for the ESTRA program, or what we call PCE solar battery savings, there will be a contract to describe that program. So it gets pretty big. Like the more programs we integrate, the more of these contracts we will have.
You're signing 1 and 2 now. I guess it's safe to assume that you're confident that Lunar can deliver on 3 and 4 and you can work out an agreement with them?
It's a good question. I think so. Peter's leading on scope 3. I will let you speak to that. What do you think
Well, I think that, as Jan has been alluding to, the biggest priority for us is to making sure that once we get a system installed at that time, the system can connect to our environment, to the platform. And then secondary to that priority is working with the constellation of hardware that is connected to Lunar's platform already and changing the way that those devices operate. So that's really what scope 3 is about. And we've decided not to move forward with that in particular right now, especially because when we do something like that, like a load modification agreement, which is the title of the scope 3 doc, what we're really doing is getting a commitment from Lunar for those other devices that's part of their constellation of networks, and then communicating to our regulators that those devices are going to show up when we need them to. And the timeline to do that didn't really sync with the timeline for the executing this agreement. You got anything else?
No. Yeah, that's right. And then for scope 4, we just wanted to have a buffer to figure out in the summer how we want to grow this. Once we've figured out how we're going to integrate our existing programs, what new programs do we want to create? We know we want to do a few more programs for commercial customers because we have very few of those right now. Could they be integrated under the DERMS platform? We will see. So I think I'm fairly certain there will be some sort of new program under scope 4, and then scope 3, I think we'll discuss more in the fall. There's some, yeah.
Staffing to handle this, it's you who did the RFP, who did all that stuff, and you have other support. I'm going. It's not just gonna sit there by itself. Somebody's gonna have to sit and manage it.
Yeah.
Who will that be? Will that be you two or?
Yeah.
Peter.
Yeah. For sure, it'll be, so it depends on the program too.
Yeah.
Folks working on like the home upgrade program, for instance, they might tap into the platform ensuring that building electrification devices are not being used when we don't want them to, and the platform can tell us about that.
Yeah,
So
I think
we might have
long-term,
multiple.
We have enough staff to handle all this, and we need more staff. How does all that work? And you don't have to answer it now, I'm just throwing out the issue.
It's a reasonable
fair
question, yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah,
that's, I
yeah.
think we will
Unless you
get there
want-
when we get there.
Unless you want to work 18 hours a day.
Yeah, which we've done in the last 3 months.
Everybody gone, I want you to get to those slides, we're already at time.
Yes.
You keep going, then I wanna have a big discussion.
I'm almost done. These we can do pretty quickly, I think. This is also mostly for the board, but also, of course, for your interest. There's just a few principles in the budget that I thought were interesting to learn. We have some fixed fees, but they're pretty modest. Like most of the fees are based on how many devices are integrated. So the fees only apply once there's actually devices integrated. We won't pay much until Lunar is really controlling devices. Also, these fees decrease as economies of scales are achieved. And discounts are provided due to a collaboration with SVCE. And just to give you a sense that this will likely, for this first tranche that we're calling MSA Scope 1 and Scope 2, this will be a contract over 5 years of about $3.1 million. And this is kind of the split of between like fixed platform fees, the Lunar volumetric fees, and then the device partners. So those are the folks, so like the Teslas and the Sunruns and the Reams, like the folks that create the devices, the storage systems, the heat pump water heaters, they also often charge for letting us access their device. And that's what the device partner fees are.
Is that an ongoing fee that every time?
It's a one-time setup fee sometimes, and then otherwise mostly an ongoing fee, yeah. And that's a negotiation, so we're definitely working on that to get those down. I think that's my last slide before we just talk about next steps. So we also have some performance guarantees in the contract. You know, we can terminate the contract for cost and for convenience. Convenience means no cost. We have service level agreements, which are basically performance guarantees for the software services. So if you have an issue with the software, we have, timelines for technical support, response, and resolution. And if they don't meet that, they pay us a performance credit. And then we also have load shift performance guarantees where we don't need to go into all these details. But the idea is if they're not dispatching, if they're not reducing load in the way that they promised they would, we also get a performance credit.
You said you can terminate for convenience, and that means there's no termination fee?
There are fees for termination. We're still discussing if that's 1 month of service fee or 2 months of service fee. So there's some like kind of details like that we're still discussing. Yeah, it's pretty standard for a software service agreement that there is a termination fee, but the question is how high.
Donna's a hard negotiator.
I am a hard negotiator. Mostly. So the next steps, we're hoping to approve the main services agreement, the Scope 1 and Scope 2, on the May 22nd board meeting. During that meeting, we are bringing it to executive committee meeting on Monday to prepare for that. And then when that happens, if that happens, our first priority, as I already said, would be the integration of these PC solar plus battery savings program devices in hopefully June, July. And then we would continue working on the integration of other PCE energy programs through 2026. We would look into things like GovPV first, probably. We would then look into heat pump water heaters under home upgrade, maybe heat pump HVAC under home upgrade. So these details are still going to be figured out what really is going to be the exact timeline. And then as we already alluded to, we're going to look into that load modification agreement Scope 3 and third-party administered programs Scope 4 by the end of 2025 and sign contracts for those potentially. And if that happens, we would come back to you and the board to discuss those. So you had asked, like, what does that explain it? Kind of like, this is what Lunar does, and this is kind of our next steps. So, yeah.
Thank you. All right, I'd like to set, because we are over time, but I think the goal here is I would like to be able to recommend this to the board. So I'd like you to think about questions you might have to get to that end, or if you don't want to do that, state that. Before that, 2 quick things I wanted to bring up, then I'll go around by Luby first. Peter, when we did our thing a year ago in the working group, we talked about all the other things people were doing. One of the interesting things that I took away from that session was like in Hawaii, the buy-in from the public. And part of it was, it's available to everybody, first come, first serve. This little difference is literally just low income right now. But have you guys got a plan for getting that buy-in so that when this is going, everybody feels like like, they were fine trading their autonomy over their devices in exchange for whatever the incentive was. This is a whole incentive. You have a plan for that, is my first question. And the only other question is on the budget, on the 3.1, is there already something set up for this? That would be a new ask. I'm for either way, I just wanna know if that's a pre-existing thing or a future thing.
Well,
Yeah,
go into
go to
the
the
first
first one.
question because it's a little, it was a complicated question. Jason, I think that your question is actually most relevant to the presentation that Raphael's about to bring.
Okay, say,
In that, we're looking at, the DERMS platform is really, like, it is technically agnostic to the technology type in the customer class. So when as we expand programs, the whole intention of this is to create architecture that the hardware that we're deploying through our programs can connect to. Inclusive of both low income programs and general market programs. And we'll talk about the expansion of low income resi program.
And the answer on budget is, so the 3.1 million is for the next 5 years. We have forecasted how much we think we'll need for fiscal year 25-26. Some of that budget will go to power resources and some of that budget will go to energy programs. In my understanding, because of that, it goes to power resources partially because of that notion that we're reducing our resource adequacy costs by doing this. In my understanding, and we'd have to confirm with Raphael and Roy, the part that is under power resources is new and additional. The part that's under energy programs, we already kind of had to set aside. Is that correct?
Yes.
Very good.
thank you, Michael.
Well, I think it's a wonderful program, pretty complex. I guess that's my question is, what can go wrong? Does anything keep you up at night? Can you imagine not getting enough customers, taking too long, going over budgets? You know, what are the things that you have to really pay attention to make it really work?
It's a really good question. What keeps me up at night is not getting enough customers.
Yeah,
And that may be just my gut and my paranoia, but we know that we have a core base of customers we want to integrate because it's the ones that we are giving a lot of upfront incentives to integrate them under this platform. But then beyond that, what if we're doing this much work and no customer wants us to control this? I mean, I'm being very frank here. Because you asked about my biggest fear. I don't think this will happen. But otherwise, I think the contract has a lot of teeth. Lunar is a very good partner. I'm not worried about the budget is kind of appropriate. I think if you think about this for 5 years, it's not considering how much, what our budget is overall, it's not that much. But this not integrating that many devices.
Yeah, and on that, just to
Yeah.
tack on, to give a little perspective here, Lunar is a battery company and they acquired this awesome software company. And that is the GridShare platform. We're both pretty bullish on their ability to load shift batteries in particular. Other asset classes like smart thermostats, heat pump water heaters and EVs, I would say I'm more in like a speculative position and I'm a little fearful, not really fearful, but if I were to put a fear on all of this.
Cautious.
Yeah, I'm cautious about their ability to execute in those arenas. For our Sunrun program in particular, an amazing lesson learned that we got from that program was that we were using a different DERMS platform that Sunrun was partnered with, and they had to transition to Lunar to do the services that we needed them to, because that other platform was not performing well. And we got a lot of customer complaints about that. We had the batteries weren't working how they thought they were going to. So the customer ops of this is really, the optics is really really something to pay attention to as well.
Okay, I had one question that I think you may have answered, and I just want to be sure of that, and then I have another question. It sounded like there is an expectation that this will, there will be some financial benefits to PC for doing this because it will reduce your resource adequacy cost. And is it like completely gonna offset or?
Good question. So we did analysis, our power resources team. There's an energy benefit. So by just having to procure less energy, and there's this resource adequacy benefit. Just to give you a rough sense, the value of the benefit aligns more or less with that connected capacity fee. It's a little bit higher than that. So if you look at the total fees, it is not, it doesn't cover the total fees, but it's, I would say roughly 50% of the total fees.
Okay.
But it's important to note that the total economics also depend on the rates that customers pay. And load shifting can result in revenue loss. So the total economics in the short run are likely negative for PC.
Yeah. And my other question, which you kind of touched on, your greatest fear. What is the incentive to be, looking beyond the people that you're gonna tell have to participate in this? Those of us who maybe already have a battery system.
What's the incentive?
What's the incentive?
Yeah.
What's in it for them? Why would they want to join?
We'll have to discuss that, yeah. This is definitely a discussion we have to have within PCE. It's like, what is this worth it for us? We'll have to do more analysis, like Raphael said, like. If this is not a net positive for PCE as a business, quote unquote, how much are we willing to spend on this, right? So I think that's why we're not doing scope 4 now, because we have to have those conversations. Like, what are our incentive structures in the long run? Can we pay customers? I can tell you what other CCAs are doing, like MCE is giving customers I think now $10 or $20 a month if they can control the battery. It's something we could do. Do we want to do that? I don't think there's alignment that that's a good strategy. Raphael will actually talk about kind of our future program strategy in a second. It's really much more focused on financing and not so much on incentives. So it's a big question that we'll discuss more this summer. We don't have an answer yet.
Yeah, it seems like you need to have something that would be a benefit for the customer, otherwise.
Yeah,
Use that
why would they
language control.
Yeah.
Which could be kind of scary.
Yeah, I kind of agree. That's the principle of a demand response program, right? Like, if you allow us to reduce your load during certain times, like they're called events, then we'll give you money for it. That's the concept of a DR program. We have not achieved alignment at PCE yet that we want to offer something like that. We will discuss it, but if we're gonna do that, TBD.
I'll be quick because I've asked too many questions already. They already integrate 100,000 devices worldwide. You mentioned concerns about their abilities beyond batteries. Do you know how many of those 100,000 are not batteries?
I don't know.
I think they're all batteries, actually.
All
Yeah,
batteries.
Actually, no, I think they have some EV. It's a good question. I don't know the exact number, but I don't know if they're working with EVs, I think in Japan. And so I don't know if that includes EVs. It's a good question. I could follow up, but it's a large majority.
Okay. And then just one quick comment. I was on Lunar's website earlier and watched the little video from the CEO, and it's marketing, but it resonated with me. They seem very purpose driven. He talked about, we need to electrify everything. This helps. We need to, save the planet for our children. I'm doing this for my son. So
Yeah,
it resonated with me. So
that's great to hear.
Yeah.
They're good people, seemingly. I mean, they are good people.
Yeah.
I want to do a quick time check
Yeah.
also. We take, we're about an hour into our meeting and we have 2 more equally big
Yes.
juicy items. So.
I'd like to allow 2 more minutes of discussion.
So
and
we've
then
already
make our-
spoken,
I'll
maybe
pass.
allow
Robert.
time for other people
I'll
to
pass.
speak.
Diane, Stephen?
Should I wanna go first?
Either, Steve, you're up first, you go, then Diane. Go.
Who will be installing these devices? Like, is Lunar self-performing, do they hire subcontractors?
Yeah, so Lunar is really just the ones who control the devices. The installation will happen under our existing programs for the time being. So under home upgrade, right, we have our implementer Franklin, and they have trade allies that install. Under the solar battery savings program, we work with our implementer Haven, and they have contractors that install. So that doesn't change. None of that changes. Lunar doesn't get involved in that side of the business.
So in those contracts that you're referring to, will there be prevailing wage requirements in those?
That would be determined under those programs, and
So
Raphael.
in our turnkey residential
Yeah.
program, we do require building. So that would continue. This does not affect how home upgrade works.
This does not affect how devices are installed under scope 1 and scope 2 at all. It really just, once the install has happened, how they're operating after. That's where Lunar gets involved. They don't get involved in the installation of devices. Not at this point, maybe under scope 3, but not under scope 2.
And yeah, you had the solar battery savings and then home upgrade, but PV would also be there, right?
Yeah, I did say that, yeah, that was included.
This is a really great program. It's exciting, and I hope that the CAC can make a recommendation to move forward with adoption. And I'm excited that you're working with SVCE partnering. That seems like a good economy of scale with them. For customers with water heaters who might not want to participate on a certain day or week, would they have like a manual override or any ability to opt out? Like if
Yeah.
they had company or something like that?
Yeah, that's another really good question. It's a pretty detailed one. It's a little bit of an ethical question too. Some people again say, if we pay for the entire device, there's no override option. Because what tends to happen, if you have an easy override, there's often, that's what MCE has seen in their program, it's a constant override. I've also heard, so some people say there's gonna be constant override and then it defeats the purpose. Others have said that is not what we're seeing. Like, we've worked with other installers and implementers that have said, we've done programs like energy storage programs for a long time and customers tend to not override because they don't worry about it. You know, so I don't know what to believe.
Okay, so TBD, let's check back
TBD.
on how that's going.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
I think decided on a program by program basis and the jury's still out if that causes an issue or not.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Joseph.
Is there a consideration, and this is specifically on the incentive side, because it sounds a lot like Home Connect, for example, is a demand response program. It rewards people for reducing usage and penalizes them when they don't. It seems like a pretty overlapping thing with what Diane said there. And I know it's its own demand response program and it's different from Lunar, but it sounds like there's some infrastructure here where there might be opportunities to collaborate.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there's some other providers like Renew Home, they're now called Home Connect,
Oh.
merged with Google. No, who knows that? I mean, that's so Home Connect merged. Home Connect is a demand response provider. They merged with Google. They now Renew Home. They would be a competitor to this. Potentially a partner, you know, like we're definitely gonna start talking to other folks and seeing if we could do a joint approach here, but currently they are a competitor and we would just work with heat pump water heaters that are not Home Connect driven, like control.
You ready?
Yeah, it just seems the response you gave to Kathleen, something that the math doesn't add up, because it seems like we're saving money somehow, some way by reducing the demand,
Yep,
right? So there should be a payback, but it sounds like there's not enough saving
not
to
enough.
cover the cost of the administration of the SaaS, the software as a
Correct.
service thing.
And
It's telling me maybe the SaaS is overpriced because it's like, paying, $5 to save $3, right? You never, in the business sense, you never do that.
correct.
So my question is, you have 17 of these vendors. Were these guys the most cost effective one out of the whole lot of them?
They were equally priced to the top three. So the top three all came in with very similar pricing.
When you say the
And-
top three, the lowest price or the highest price?
We had three finalists.
Right.
And of the three finalists, we did a detailed cost evaluation and they were all, actually, there was Lunar and one that were the most cost competitive and the third one was more expensive. So there were among our finalists, the most cost competitive. And on your distributed energy resources, we want to say that they will always save us money, but they don't always. They just don't. It is a
Sorry, finish your thought.
Yeah, it is a cost that we are willing to contribute. We have a lot of policy goals and PCE agency goals. One of them is, as we saw in the beginning, facilitate installation of distributed energy resources. We are willing to spend money on that. It doesn't have to be a business decision. And I have to add, which is maybe what Raphael wants to say. So again, it is not just the cost for the platform. It is also if our customers are using the distributed energy resources during 4 to 9 p.m., they are not paying us the high 4 to 9 p.m. rates. And so we have another loss from that. So this is a loss business for PCE, but I am saying we're doing that for policy and strategic reason because we truly believe that that distributed energy resources are the future. Also, I personally want to add, there's transmission and distribution grid reductions that we're not considering this conversation. So we've never, no one can do a comprehensive analysis here. If you could start, if you then say, okay, if we're considering those losses, then we have to consider transmission and distribution cost savings, we have to consider the environmental benefits, and then it gets a very complicated. So I feel like that conversation is much more complicated.
So just kind of sum up, it sounds like the cost benefit is to the customer because they're using less energy during peak. And then to PG&E or benefits here, because, you know, they're getting less load on their grid, which they're failing to maintain, right?
And
So,
it meets our mission, right?
Well,
And there's a lot of other value, like customer, like again, it's customer.
yeah, we're helping our customer. I'm not sure much about helping PG&E.
I might
The core
suggest-
objective, and maybe you're gonna say this, is about resource adequacy and where that comes from. So we're buying generation that's mostly gas plants to run in peak hours
Yeah.
because solar can't cover that. So this is ultimately strategically in the long run, not today, but in the long run intended to replace our RA requirement. So we're actually helping decarbonize the grid by creating more flexible load.
I don't mean to rush everybody here, but I want to see public comment, and I'm gonna propose a motion. So is there any public comment?
Can I ask one more question? I just thought of.
Sure. But
Well,
let me do public comment, then ask for it. Is there public comment? Because I don't think there is any.
Yes,
Well,
we do.
there
have
is?
a public
Oh,
comment.
sorry. I didn't see it.
It's okay, only I can see it on my screen.
All right, sorry, Steve, let me do this first.
It's okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, so, see, Eduardo, you have your hand raised, I will allow you to speak and you can unmute yourself.
Hey, hi, Eduardo, Pedigree, Menlo Park. I'm still here. So my question is about the diversity of storage devices being used. How is the contract structured to support a variety of batteries?
Do you mean, Eduardo, like different battery types or different customer types?
Different battery types. I mean,
Different-
they certainly support their own battery, and I assume Tesla's power walls. But what else are they going to support? And how have you structured the contracts to encourage them to support more batteries, more battery types?
Yeah, it's a good question. We are basically the driving factor of telling them who they need to integrate with. So it is, again, we have to distinguish between our program, we call them programmatic on-ramps, our existing programs that feed into the DERMS platform. That's where we make a decision what device partners we work with. Do we work with Tesla? Do we work with Franklin, what are they called, home battery or something? Do we work with Enphase? So under those programs, we decide which batteries we work with, and then they feed into the platform. And we tell Lunar, this is very much simplified, but we're working with these device partners, you need to integrate with them. There's of course a little bit of negotiation in that, but so that is more a decision that PCE makes on the program end and then tells Lunar to integrate in simple terms. There's of course cases where Lunar says we cannot integrate with them, and then we'll have a discussion about that. But generally, they said they are very open to integrating with a variety of providers.
Okay, thanks. I mean, part of the question is because when the EV charging happened, my EV was not supported, and I know that a number of them were not. So there's that feedback loop about the more you support, the more you'll get people out there saying, "Oh yeah, I love this guy," et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Public comment, and then Stephen.
I do not see any other raised hands.
All right, Stephen, did you have your question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, how was this budget formulated and is it tariff proof?
Is it tariff proof?
Yeah,
What do you mean with tariff proof?
like you have a budget of 3 million and what happens with tariffs increase and then this?
Oh, tariffs. Yeah, I get it. Okay,
The
sorry.
big
I was like, are you talking about energy tariffs? I got it.
Or,
It's a very good question. The budget was based on, it's called a bottoms-up budget. We looked at the existing programs that we want to integrate over the next 5 years. And then we looked how many devices we think we're going to install under those. And we looked at the cost that would incur based on Lunar's cost proposal. You're totally right. If tariffs, continue to exist or even increase or decrease, those numbers of forecasted devices will potentially change dramatically. We're already seeing that in the market. So It is a forecast, that's all I can say. We're trying to make a focus on our best ability right now.
It's volumetric, so we will only spend
Yeah.
what we actually use.
Exactly.
Oh, okay. I would like to make a motion.
Before that, I want to clarify, was the answer wasn't clear about the costs among all the 17 vendors that bid. So you said the top 3 were pretty close, so where did they sit among all the other
So
17?
of the 17, I don't have the exact numbers, but of the 17, 6 or 7 were kicked out immediately because I didn't meet the basic requirements of the RFP.
Oh,
So there were only
not
like
qualified.
11 left. Of the 11, 5 didn't meet the more qualitative requirements of the RFP. So in the end, we only did a cost comparison of the top ones. Like there was no need for us to look into the cost of the vendor we knew wasn't right for us.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
basically.
so there was a qualification issue.
Yeah,
Okay, got it.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I would like to make a quick motion that the CAC favors the adoption of the DERMS program and recommends the approval of the MSA and the scope 1 and the scope 2 pieces of the program.
I'll second.
Okay. Thank you. Any comment? Great. Okay, can we take a vote on that? Vanessa, do you have that? I'm sorry. I can relay it again.
I
CAC
can refer to the recording.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. I'll say it again as we're starting the vote. CAC favors the adoption of the DERMS program, recommends the approval of the MSA and scope 1 and scope 2 pieces of the program. Staff, is that sufficiently
Scope 1 and
stated?
scope 2 contracts.
Scope 1 and scope 2 contracts. Will we
Otherwise-
amend that? I move that we amend to say scope 1 and scope 2 pieces of the contract.
No, it's just contracts instead of pieces.
Scope 1 and scope 2 of the contract.
Scope 1 and scope 2 contracts.
Scope 1 and scope 2
Yes.
contract, no pieces of the program. Can I get a second for
Do
that?
we have to add the name of the vendor?
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Should put the name of the
Okay.
vendor.
Let me rephrase, and I apologize. CAC favors the adoption of the DERMS program, recommends the approval of Lunar what are they, Lunar?
Lunar Energy.
Lunar Energy, to carry out the MSA and scope 1 and scope 2 contract.
Correct.
Second, thank you. Can I get a vote on that?
Is that Luna or Lunar?
Yes, Lunar. That's correct.
That's correct.
I said Lunar, I meant to say Lunar.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Thank you.
Great, thank you guys very much. Thank you for presenting that, everybody. Okay, now we're going on to the analysis, recommendation of residential solar and storage programs. This is also an action item. It's scheduled for 20 minutes, last one 45, scheduled for 20. So let's, you guys, please, everybody, let them go. Write down your questions. If there's a technical question, ask it, otherwise save it till the end of the discussion.
Yeah, I just one as an aside, the whole VPP arena, all the STRM stuff and all the integrations and everything are intensely complicated. You should look at this as basically we're starting to pilot something that may be dramatically different a few years from now. And there are all sorts of technology, behavioral, legal, economic issues around this whole thing. I think we're gonna learn a lot. I think in the end, it's gonna be super important, but it's gonna take a while to get there. Okay, so I am going to talk about the residential solar and storage program. I'm going to move very quickly through the context setting here. It's actually about much more than the residential solar program. It's about the whole residential program, and it's about what we're gonna try to do with finance. So let me go ahead and jump in. You guys have all seen this diagram or some flavor of this diagram, which is, how we operate. We support individual decisions. We help drive innovation through technology and best methods, We also support, why is this clicker not working? Policy, next, nothing is up.
Policy.
I know.
Shaping policy, so that's both through the reach code as well as at the state levels. And our overarching objective is to mobilize market forces. That's the end goal, but to get there, we can't just swing a magic wand and make that happen. We want to demonstrate scalable methods and business models and get other people to adopt them across the state. So that is really very critical. And so this conversation is going to focus on this notion of business models and market forces. Okay, so I don't need to tell you too much about this, but we're after 2/3 of the emissions pie, not all of the pieces, but we're very focused particularly on single family homes and individual vehicles, because those are the largest portions of the emissions pie in our service territory. And you've seen this, our range of programs. I'm happy to say that we pretty much, with the terms coming into place, we've pretty much built out everything that's here. So it's taken us a while to get here, but we have built out everything that's in the pie chart. So that's kind of cool. And to get here, we have done already $60 million in investment. This is both our, expenses, meaning incentives and technical assistance and that sort of stuff, and our capital programs, which are finance programs, so on-bill finance and our PPAs and so forth. And we're starting to see statewide impact around our programs. So the REACH codes, enormous impact on the state building codes. Our cost effectiveness push in EV charging and on electrification are starting to have real impact, innovation in a number of areas. I won't spend a lot of time there. Some of you have seen this. Basically, we really have 5 major programs, or will have 5 major programs. REACH codes, residential electrification, EV charging, and then our solar and storage programs. And then we have a set of smaller programs. Used EV, e-bikes, which are primarily equity programs, GovEE and EV, which are small, local government programs, and Flex Market, which is our one commercial EE program. We are looking to grow the EE portfolio. There's CPUC funds. That's going to be coming later. And you had a presentation on that last week, or last month rather. And here you can see, of these programs, REACH codes and electrification are CO2 emissions reductions programs, and there are equity components, particularly in the latter. And then our solar and storage is after creating affordability, resilience, and grid services. Those are the principal objectives that we have around those programs. Yana and Peter spoke to this earlier, but we have over 200 income qualified homeowners that are going through the solar and battery savings program. So that's great. So we hope to have those installed in the coming months. This is our principal vehicle today for income qualified folks in terms of solar and batteries. And of course, GovPV. We've talked about this quite a bit on a number of occasions, and the 36 sites are expected to yield somewhere on the order of $48 million in savings across the entire portfolio for our local government partners. So solar and storage produce savings. That's really one of the takeaways here, and that's very important for the next part of the conversation. And that is that not every technology has the same context. So if each technology needs to be considered within the context of where it is in the adoption cycle and what's going on with it, if you will, in terms of the economics and the market segments and so forth. Solar is by far the most mature. And by the way, when I say solar, I mean solar and storage. So I'm just shorthanding solar. Our principal position is that solar and storage should in general not be incentivized. And what I mean by not incentivized, that we're putting money in because it doesn't come back. And the reason for that is there's a lot of savings to be had. And if we do it properly, customers and PCE should be able to see some of those savings. EVs are also maturing very quickly, and we're targeting e-bikes and EVs, as I mentioned earlier, primarily as equity programs. And then buildings and EV charging are the least mature in the market, and they need the most support, and that includes financial support. Okay, so there's a big difference between each of these segments. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but we had originally thought that the residential program would be built on the 0% loan program. But as we thought about this, there were a lot of liabilities. And one of the big ones was, well, we only have a certain amount of our own capital. We would maybe do 1,000 homes, and then it would be over. We would be done, and nothing else would happen. That is no good. That is not scalable. We're not going to change the market by doing that. So there are other issues, customers can opt out, that would be bad. So we scrapped this concept, we said that's not where we wanna go. And since then, the distributed energy resources framework was developed. This was presented at the board, as I recall, it was also presented here. And Jana and Peter have been instrumental in driving that forward. And again, this kind of articulates this notion of scalable, self-sufficient, self-sustaining solutions, in this case, financing solutions, and then the integration of the distributed energy resources within existing programs. So home upgrade being the lead one here in this particular case, but also in the commercial work that we're doing. So philosophically, we're seeing the need to go is first, we need to drive down the cost for electrification. Okay, and we're doing that through our right sizing policy, our methods and other related items that we're doing. And in the process, over time, our aspiration is to reduce the incentives. We only have a limited amount of capital. As more and more people are doing things, we actually don't have enough capital to address everything that needs to be done. There is no public agency that has enough capital to do everything that needs to be done. And over time, we need to move towards finance as being the principal vehicle to support customers, not exclusively, but the principal vehicle. First with our own capital, which is what we're doing with programs like on-bill finance, but then over time bringing in third-party capital, which is much larger pools of funds to do a lot more at scale. This is the only way that we're going to get scale in our programs. So this is a general directional intention. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. We of course have been monitoring community input. People like solar, that's really the takeaway here. And their rates are too high. So yes, everybody knows that. And then in electrification, people are concerned about costs, not only installation costs, but operating costs. So we need to tackle all of these issues in terms of what the program looks like going forward. So we have 6 core objectives, 6 or 7, depending on how you count. We need to reduce friction to accelerate adoption. We need to improve customer bills, which improves the cost benefit of electrification. We need to lower installation costs. We need to deliver resilience. This is all stuff you know. Establish reliable grid services. This is a major piece of what the DERMS is about. We need to bring in third-party finance for scalability, and we need to develop a business model that actually has continued life. And so we need to be attentive to our revenue losses and ideally then capture some revenues to account for the fact that we're losing revenue also when we install solar and storage in particular. So ultimately, we want to deliver all of these services: decarbonization, solar and storage, resilience, and VPPs. So I'll get to that. It's useful to think about the history of how our residential program has developed. And when we launched at the beginning of 2021, we just said, send us a receipt, we'll send you $1,000, to put it in simple terms. And then in late 22, we added HVAC and we added the 0% loan. Now with larger HVAC projects, customers might also be going to their own, finance options, using their own money or using lines of credit, stuff like that. But ton of customer friction, right? And all of you know this stuff, right? All these challenges in selecting products, selecting contractors, the installation, all these headaches. So as a consequence of this, we then introduced the full service notion, right? So the turnkey installation option is supposed to be the easy button, right, for customers who don't want to get into all the details. And now we have 2 paths. They can say, I want to figure it out myself. I want to choose my own products and contractors, or you guys just do it for me. Select the products, you guys have contractors, and go down that path. So this, and we expanded to whole home, and we also added personalized support. So a lot more support for customers to try to address the complexity issues that they face. So that's where we are today. Now, thinking about the general residential solar and storage program, we're basically thinking in the same terms. Okay, also, there's a lot of complexity here. It's like which products, which installers, how do I do it? There will be some customers who want to choose their own, and some customers who want to just tell me what to do and just do it, right? So the top layer here is very similar, right, to what's before. The customer can come in and do the DIY path, or they can do the full service path. For this, we will need a PCE turnkey developer. Okay, very similar to what we have today on the electrification side. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we're not going to put in incentives for people to do this because there is financial benefit for the customer. But what we can do is make the financing more attractive. Right now, there's a mess of different financing options, and it's very confusing. Some with very high interest rates, but low transaction friction. Others with fees for that contractors don't like. There are all sorts of. It's a very confusing landscape, frankly. So what we want to do is get point of sale approvals, low or no fees, and a low interest rate. Right? Something that day one, a customer can sit down and say with the contractor, oh yeah, that looks great, I signed, let's do it. So that's where we want to go, and that's the dark blue box at the bottom, PCE finance partner. But a customer could go the turnkey route and finance it themselves. Okay, now, of course, a customer could do this completely on their own without PCE knowing anything, and that's fine, go at it. But if they do either of these paths, then we get part of the customer relationship, we retain the customer relationship and the grid services, which is part of what we do. So that's the idea. And the future would be ultimately to add potentially credit enhancement. I'm going to come back to this. And then the long-term future would be a fully integrated program. Somebody could walk in the door, they say, I want to electrify everything and I want solar and storage, do it for me. And they can do the whole 9 yards. Now, there's a lot of complexity here that we haven't figured out. Don't ask me anything about how it would actually work. Because I don't know. That's at least a year and a half out. Okay, but the goal is that this previous step is this year sometime, ideally. Okay, so we are we have now the intention to move forward with RFPs to address the developer and the finance partner piece, but we have not actually started writing those RFPs. My aspiration is within the next couple of months, they would come out. And then credit enhancement. So we're not putting up all the money, but we can put up some money. We can put up some money, make some money, and make the credit terms better for the customer. So this is a little more exploratory at this point. But the idea is that potentially PCE would participate with credit enhancement for the financing, the private financing. So simplistically, this diagram basically shows, a bank is putting in half the money at 11%, PCE is putting half the money at 3%, and the developer or the customer gets 7%. That's the simple point here. There are a lot of different flavors to this. Part of what we need to do is have a dialogue. I've been engaged in a number of conversations. So we think the concept has potential, and we would explore it further in the context of the RFP process. So RFPs, there would be two, a developer one, which would be very similar to the SCHIP one that we released earlier for that program, and then a financial services RFP for kind of integrated marketed financial services, ideally again with this sort of point of sale and other benefits. And that's it.
Great. Thank you. Any questions? Go ahead, Gail.
So it seems that commercial warehouses, multifamily would be a good opportunity for solar and storage.
Well, there certainly is the potential for larger scale deployment in those scenarios. This is targeted very specifically at single family residential, which is our main target, as I mentioned earlier, on the decarbonization wedges, because it's by far the largest portion of our of our emissions. So personal, single-family homes and individual private vehicles are 2/3 of our emissions pie. Multifamily has a lot of legal and technical complexities. Commercial sites like warehouses have a lot of surface space, but not a lot of load necessarily, and so they present other complexities economically. If what we're doing works, especially on the GovPD side, then moving into other non-government segments is a possibility. That's our aspiration. And then that would present opportunities to do this kind of thing.
Robert?
You must be doing this, I think, because it's going to increase the number of residential properties to electrify.
That's the intention.
Do you have any idea of the number of them? So there's an X number today of people who've electrified.
Yeah,
What will this give us?
well,
I was putting you on the spot.
yeah, so since it's not our money, right? Remember, it's not our money. And because it's not our money, and by the way, I didn't mention, but I should make clear here, this finance partner, right, would be intended to support both solar and storage and electrification.
Right.
Okay.
I got that.
So by doing this, our theoretical capacity is basically infinite. Okay, so we could move from doing, you know, I'm trying to remember, maybe 60 to 80 electrification projects a month. We need to be 2 orders of magnitude better than that, right, to address the air quality district rules, right? And we're not going to do that on our money. This is the only way to do that, right? So I didn't exactly answer your question,
No, you
right?
didn't, but I get it. So it's going to increase the number of homes that are electrified. It's going to increase the solar storage, solar panels and storage for the better. And will you ever be able to quantify that, or we have to
Well,
look back and say?
Yeah, so the reason that question is difficult to answer is because for volume to happen, right, you need both the, let's call it programmatic infrastructure. You need the technical capacity, the supply chains all have to be there for the products, right? And then you have to have the adoption motivation, which is partly a marketing question, right? And partly a social zeitgeist question.
Sure. Well, it's an exciting evolution of the marketplace. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
Kathleen?
Can you go to the next slide? I feel like there's something between this one and, okay, so. What got PCE incentives, but I thought you started off by saying you don't think that solar.
Yeah, so it's not clear in this diagram. Incentives here refer to the electrification, not to the solar.
Yeah.
In fact, if this all works, right, if we could do it entirely on finance, that's where we will go.
Diane, and then Michael.
This is super exciting, and I want to highlight the 60 million spent on programs so far. That you were going fast, so I don't know if other people caught that. It's a big deal, and I think the potential to add solar plus battery storage to the home electrification program is a big deal. It's like chocolate and peanut butter that go together well. And they're great.
I'm gonna use that.
I just wanted to encourage you to really pursue the on-bill payment option. I think that will make it easier for people. It reduces their upfront out of
Yes.
pocket, and that's appealing to a lot of people. And then I really like the idea that you proposed to buy down the financing rate, the interest rate. That's another one, 7% stings, that's high. If you could buy it down more, that'd be great, but just making it more attractive than a standard, like a homeowner's loan that
Yes.
people can get from their own bank.
Yes, that absolutely is our goal. There's some interesting stuff happening in terms of finance providers, and some of whom are climate specific. Or clean energy specific, so I'm cautiously optimistic that we will end up with something good.
Great. I did have one quick question. Is it possible to have a working group within the CAC to support this work as it evolves?
Well, I think it would be super helpful to have somebody from the CAC when we get into the RFP process in the same way that we've done it with other RFPs, and there will be two. So we you know. They'll be closely related, so we haven't exactly thought through the mechanics there, but we certainly would like to have some participation. I also should note that SVCE is also very interested in this idea. They, you know, will probably put a little bit of their own spin, but the RFPs may be joint.
Michael and then me.
Yeah, Raphael, so can you elaborate a little bit on the credit enhancement theory and
Sure.
how it would work and how PCE could actually
Make money.
make money on it?
Yeah. So I'm gonna just give you one flavor because as I mentioned, from a legal and specific finance mechanism standpoint, there are differences between you know, interest rate buy down, loan loss reserve and a loan participation. Those are different things. And if you know, somebody from a finance department says, oh, you shouldn't talk about those things as being similar, but they're all broadly credit enhancement. And credit enhancement as a thing is actually very common in other domains. So you have in affordable housing, it's super common. Green bank, some of you have heard of green bank mechanisms. And all of these mechanisms have similar principles. And so one way, and we spoke, for example, with River City Bank. River City Bank has done a lot of work with CCAs. And they said, oh yeah, we could totally do a credit enhancement. And the way it would work, you know, that they proposed is you put, you know, X dollars into an account at River City Bank. And let's say it's $10 million, which is what the board approved for a residential solar and storage program financing, right? So we plunk down $10 million into River City Bank account, and that's an interest-bearing account. Okay, so out of the gate, we're starting to generate interest, right? And it's a loan loss reserve. And the loan loss reserve says, okay, bank is issuing credit for solar and storage systems. Some of that credit will be bad, will not be repaid. And then they have recourse to our pool of funds. So we could lose money, but it all depends on exactly the underwriting and the performance, right? And there are ways to help make sure that the performance is good, right? But there's a balancing act there between who you serve and creditworthiness, right? So in the early days, if we go down this path, in the early days, it's likely that that the performance on the program is going to be the top priority. And then we will become more flexible over time. Did I answer your question?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna go really quick. You have more? You have a follow-up? I'll go really quick and then we're 8:07. I want to do public comment and then I have an idea. My thing is, I love this. I think this is great. I think take the peanut butter and chocolate. It's also a relay race because you can model this on the existing electrification program, and what doesn't work, you can adapt on the fly, hand it off to this. You and I have been talking about the finance thing for 4 or 5 years. I think one of the things you could do, to borrow on Diane's idea, is have a working group that helps just on figuring that out. Maybe none of us want to do that, but there's something where we go out and research what else is being done. You might already know that, you just mentioned 3 or 4 different items. But I think getting that lined up, even theoretically, would be huge, because then it's like, let's go. Everybody's sharing the risk and we're all good. I think that the finance piece makes this work. I've been waiting for this since 7 years ago. We start focusing on this, and I think this is the way to do it. And I recommend we do that. Does anybody else have any comments? Then I have a motion on that. Go ahead, Remy.
I'm still a little confused because it sounds like that there's no cost to PCE, but then PCE is buying down. Are you guys using the interest from that 10 million in River City Bank?
Yeah,
to buy it down?
So credit enhancements, the first thing is, this is more exploratory at this stage. So we are having internal conversations. We are talking to some of finance providers about this concept. But it's still early days in that conversation. But as I mentioned, in the case of River City Bank, where they basically said, well, this is how we would recommend doing it, right? So you put $10 million in an account, it's an interest-bearing account, you're generating interest, right? But it's a recourse option if loans go bad, right? And so that's one of the models whereby you could actually generate a return off a credit enhancement. But there are other ways to do that, like loan participation is that the money going out is actually 50-50 or whatever, some percentage ours, some percentage theirs. And of course, people are paying back, those are loans, right? And so we generate a return.
So how's this buy down?
So the buy down is actually the one that's least clear to me, frankly. So, but it's some flavor of this, we put money up somewhere. It's some form of recourse, maybe, I'm gonna make it up. Maybe we're generating 6%, but we apply 3% to, paying down some of the interest rate.
Okay.
Because it does assume that we lock up a certain amount of capital for the purpose of doing this credit mechanism. So it does lock in the capital, but it can create a return.
This is capital that would go to evil bank otherwise? Is it a good bank?
Well, I mean, we have a range of different investments, but we also, are putting money into other programs. So GovPD is our capital going to build those solar and storage systems, and then the money is getting paid back to us. So there are different ways that we deploy that sort of capital.
Is there any public comment on this, Vanessa?
I'm not seeing any public comment online.
Okay, does anybody else have any comments or questions? I have a question, Stephen, go ahead.
I have a peripheral comment. It's just, I know finance very, very little, but I know also that, for example, California-wide programs like Go Green, they offer low interest financing for projects, both energy efficiency
Yes.
for that and also solar.
Yes.
And they offer different loans. I'm guessing that those banks also use a form of credit enhancement.
They do. So Go Green is a perfect example of why we need this program. And the reason is that the interest rate is good. It is credit enhanced by the state. That's why it's credit enhanced by CPUC dollars. Okay, so that's why the interest rate is good. And it's incredibly onerous and nobody wants to use it. So we need to both address the interest rate and the usability piece. And in fact, one of the credit unions that I've been talking to is Self-Help Credit Union, which is a Go Green participant. And, so they have experience dealing with that sort of credit enhanced mechanism, but I've spoken with several contractors. I'm like, yeah, we don't use it a lot because there are so many requirements. So we have to address the usability and the interest rate issues.
Thank you. Great, I have a proposal again. Please fix this as I say it, Raphael. I would recommend, I'm not making a motion yet because I don't want to reverse it. But I would say we could do something like CAC recommends continuing to investigate the residential solar plus storage program based on an integrated electrification solar and storage program, focusing on how to bring in external financing for the goals of Peninsula Clean Energy.
Sounds great to me.
Okay,
Good.
I can repeat that. Does anybody have any comment on that before I go? This is not a specific thing, so this is very nation, high level stuff, right? But I'm so eager for us to do this.
Yeah, well, and they sent, within possibly 2 months, we would have the RFP.
Right, and I'd love to, I also, not as part of the motion, but I would strongly recommend that you get one of the members of this group to help in the RFPs as you've done in the past.
Absolutely.
And I also recommend we don't decide now that we look into doing a working or an ad hoc group to help with either the finance piece or the whatever piece you need for that.
Yeah,
too.
I would start with the RFPs, so certainly another set of eyes for the RFPs and participating in the review process, that would be
So we
great.
can bring that up next month too, as part of this. Okay, so let me read that again. I now, go ahead, please.
What is the action that you're gonna be asking the board?
I don't have an action.
Don't have it.
So it's not going to the board this month. We are gonna be at the Audit and Finance Committee on Monday. But we are not going to the board. We've basically taken the DER plan as kind of directional from the board already. So we plan to, assuming Audit and Finance doesn't have an issue with it, we're gonna move to RFP.
Okay, so you don't need any other approval from the board before you go ahead?
I just want to encourage the concept.
Okay, that's what I was trying to figure out, is there something specific you're trying to influence the board to do, and it's just.
I said that's what we continue the investigation of doing it this way. So is that okay?
Can you read it again?
Yes, please.
Can we
See-
see it written out to?
Yeah, I have a draft, but I'm gonna listen to
Go ahead.
Jason one
All
more
right,
time.
I'll do it
okay.
slow. I'll just slow, but try to, Citizens Advisory Committee recommends continuing to investigate the residential solar plus storage program based on an integrated electrification, solar and storage program, focusing on how to bring in external financing to meet the goals of Peninsula Clean Energy. It's kind of circular,
I
but
have one correction. Community advisory committee,
what did I say?
citizens,
Excuse me, Community Advisory Committee. I usually get that right. Thank you.
you're just saying we're paying attention.
Well, I was not. I was going backwards in time here. CSRs, can you give that to us?
Oh,
Yeah. Support, yeah.
somehow when I read this, I'm thinking,
Yeah.
are we telling them that we think we should be doing something different? And what we're really saying is, like, keep doing, keep
Yes.
going.
Yes.
It should be based on the integrated electrification solar study.
I have an even better idea here. Let me start. with The CAC supports
Investigate.
an integrated electrification, solar and storage program. Cut out the middle part,
Yeah.
focusing on how to bring in external financing. Now leave that part, get rid of the first part. The CA supports an integration of electrification, solar and storage programs.
So just to be clear,
Yes.
this will come in phases.
Yes.
First, there will be a standalone residential solar and storage program.
I understand, but conceptually,
there-
you need to follow the existing new model for electrification to adopt
Yes.
that to this model.
Yes.
I have a question, just curious, how long will the incentives then continue?
Incentives for electrification. Oh, that will depend on the economics, the net economics, and I don't have
I
that.
know I'm gonna be asked when we see this, what happens to incentives?
Yeah, so there's no near term, like, timeline for phasing out incentive. We're gonna need incentives for a long time.
Please understand, I'm very much in favor of what you're doing.
Yes.
This is the right direction.
So this is
Thank you.
completely separate from the incentive, right?
Yeah, so the electrification incentives will continue.
There is.
We will bring up a residential solar and storage program. Eventually, those two things will be related. We will not put incentives to solar and storage, but people will be able to get incentives for electrification, and that will continue for some period of time. And if the economics are all favorable and everything works, right, we would be ramping down incentives in an ideal world. Utility rates would be such that with solar, everything looks good without. And you can finance everything and everybody would be net positive out of the gate.
My goal is to jump
That's
on solar plus storage here, and I think this is a good way to do it. That's my goal. So I'm reading it again. This is the new motion. The motion is CSC supports an integration of electrification and solar plus storage, programs, focusing on how to bring in external financing to meet the goals of PCE. It's not as profound as I hope, but it works, I think. Are we cool? Anybody just say?
How about how to use external financing to meet the goals?
Sure.
No, I said, yeah, use, how we use it, okay, right.
Okay. Michael makes this motion. Could he get a second?
I'll second it.
Right, Robert seconds.
So Vanessa, I think how to use instead of how we
See,
use.
that's how he said it first. Yes, how to use.
How to use,
Yep. All right, Michael, cool.
beautiful.
Robert? You're still with that?
Yes.
All right.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Great, thank you very much. And thank you, Raphael, that was great. I'm really excited about all of this. Okay, number 5, are Blake and Ryan available?
Yes,
Okay, great.
so Ryan and Blake, I am promoting you to panelists, and I believe Ryan will be sharing the slides.
Blake, can you introduce Ryan? And I'll introduce you. It's Blake Rorschach from Princeton Energy staff doing the analysis of greenhouse gas emissions and municipal policies.
I'm just confirming we didn't have any public comment on that last item.
Correct, we asked for it and there wasn't any, correct?
Great, thank you.
Hi, thanks so much for having us. And it has been great to hear the conversation among my fellow program teams members today. Thanks so much for the support from the CAC. I'm Blake Hershaft. I'm the Building Electrification Programs Manager for Peninsula Clean Energy. I manage our Reach Codes program, which has been very successful. And then I work very closely with Ryan Gardner from Rincon, who's an expert in greenhouse gas emissions inventories and forecasts, and helped develop the tool that the CAC had requested. So I'm going to leave it to Ryan to take it away.
Thanks, Blake. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm Ryan Gardner. I'm the Director of Climate Action and Decarbonization at Rincon Consultants. And as Blake said, we work pretty closely with PCE through the RICAPS program, which is a San Mateo County-wide climate action planning program that provides support to all the jurisdictions within the county on their climate action work. And Blake and PCE asked us to help out and work on a building electrification GHG emissions tool to look at what the impacts of various REACH codes are in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So today we're gonna run through a little bit of background, what brought this about. I'll introduce the model. We'll talk about some of the model assumptions, and then we'll go through the results of the REACH codes that we looked at, and then a little bit of takeaways before we hop into questions. And Blake, do you want to give a little bit of background about the CAC request?
Yes, a very good idea by the CAC. As you're aware, we help cities and municipalities within our territory with technical support under contract with TRC to adopt REACH codes that encourage all electric new construction, moving toward all electric in existing buildings, and enhanced EV charging for multifamily buildings. I'll just read this. In 2024, the CAC requested PCE and consultants share greenhouse gas emissions impacts of REACH code policy options when sharing with cities during city council meetings. This is what the CAC had written as a resolution. The Peninsula Clean Energy Community Advisory Committee respectfully requests that the PCE Board of Directors direct staff to disclose to all its member jurisdiction and the public for each existing and planned building electrification policy, model ordinance, and regulation promoted or offered by Peninsula Clean Energy, the amount of greenhouse gas emission reduction and co-benefits that could realistically be achieved by adopting such policy, ordinance, or regulation. Based on this direction, we worked with Ryan and Rincon to, in response to the request, Rincon Consultants developed a tool that can estimate and impact the various policies at each member agency. Throughout 2025, agencies throughout the county will be adopting REACH codes ahead of the January 1st, 2026 California Building Code adoption date. So right now, just to let you know where we are with REACH codes, because this is related, we are getting to the final stage of our model REACH codes being available. We have been coordinating with jurisdictions on this topic. And earlier this week, we met with our consultant, TRC, as well as Rincon, to discuss how this tool would be integrated into the program so that when REACH codes are presented and other policy options, those policy options can be weighed in terms of greenhouse gas emission savings by decision makers.
Thanks, Blake. Okay, so to introduce the model a little bit, we first had to get a sense of the buildings that we're going to be working on and also the upcoming codes. So just as a baseline, we've built out some estimates for how the new Title 24 building efficiency standards are going to impact new construction. And that's built in as kind of a baseline that affect all of these codes. And then also the Air District Zero NOx rules for water heaters and furnaces. Sorry about that typo there. So basically both of these requirements are built into the tool. Title 24 obviously will be moving forward, and we're assuming that the Air District rules are also going to be moving forward, and that's water heating for single family and some commercial small water heating in 2027, and then HVACs starting in 2029. The tool, like I said, was built out to support cities within the county of San Mateo, and in support of PCA and the RICAPS program. The codes that we modeled in this iteration are zero NOx requirements, both for new buildings and existing buildings. We also modeled the air district requirements, which we can talk about as well. And that's really just for informational purposes, so that we know kind of what the expected reductions will be. And then all of the code reductions we talk about tonight are going to be on top of those generated by Title 24 and the air district requirements. We also looked at new building energy performance standards, or single margin source energy code. We looked at two-way air conditioning, or AC to heat pump. We looked at time of sale, both full electrification of the building, just to kind of see what that looks like, and then also just a heat pump at time of sale. Flex path at renovation, so renovations over a certain size would have options to do energy efficiency, install a heat pump or solar. And then we also looked at a cooking/kitchen renovation requirement. So like I said, the air district requirements in Title 24 are assumed as a baseline. With the Title 24 code and some of these other codes, it does get a little tricky to understand what folks are going to actually do. While the code does incentivize and make it easier to build with all electric and includes heat pumps in the prescriptive case, it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone is going to just go ahead and build all electric. So we had to make assumptions for what new construction was going to look like. So we assumed 80%, more or less 80% of new residential and commercial buildings are going to be electric. 80% on the space heating side, 80% on the water heating side, because those are now prescriptive requirements. Only 40% on multifamily water heating, and 60% of cooking and other appliances. So yeah, a lot of the things we're going to talk about tonight, there are quite a few assumptions that have to go into them, and we're kind of having to assume what people's willingness to pay for gas is. So a lot of these estimates can be tweaked, but at the end of the day, I think the outputs are still useful to think about kind of order of magnitude reductions that these different codes could provide. And the other thing with the emissions reductions to keep in mind is that we are assuming a natural gas leakage value. So that also increases some of the reductions compared to if we were just looking at combusted gas. The RICAPs, greenhouse gas inventories, are a big kind of baseline data source for us. That's where we get our natural gas and electricity consumption for each city. We also use the Comstock and ResStock models. These are Department of Energy, National Renewable Energy Laboratory models that give us breakdown of appliance type. The exception to that is we did use the California Residential End Use Survey for cooling, or amount of air conditioners that are in San Mateo County as a percentage. That's really important for the AC to heat pump code. And then we also looked at Plan Bay Area 2050 demographics projections, and that's where we're getting like how many new buildings are going to be developed, both households and jobs on the commercial side. And then as we go through these different codes and the results, I'll cover some of the key assumptions that we had to make and some of the key drivers for the reductions. And then all of the reductions that we're going to talk about tonight are the results, the annual reduction in the year 2030. So moving up to that year, there would be also reductions kind of in a linear fashion. So they're not cumulative, they're just in 2030, 5 years out. The tool also models 2045. Obviously, those reductions are a lot larger. And then we did this to kind of align with cities' greenhouse gas climate action goals, because those are on an annual basis instead of a cumulative basis. And then all the emissions results we're going to talk about today are based on the city of San Mateo. It worked out well. We're supporting San Mateo with their existing building strategy right now. So we'll be using these numbers and bringing this, similar data to their commission and council meetings over the next couple of weeks. Okay, so we'll hop into the results. On the new construction side, this is the benefit of I guess on new construction and existing building, this is the benefit of the air district zero NOx rules. So for new construction by 2030, the air district rules are going to save us 1,072 metric tons of CO2e and 9,789 metric tons of CO2e from existing buildings. And that's predominantly based off of small water heaters. The other water or furnaces don't come on until 2029, so we only get like 1 year worth of those reductions. So this is happening as the baseline, and then all the codes we talk about after this are in addition to these reductions from the air district rules. So in addition to those reductions we just talked about, in City of San Mateo, a single margin source energy code would get us an additional approximately 14 metric tons. So not a lot. This is mostly due to Title 24, the 2025 code, taking a lot of those reductions already, and also the air district requirements coming in, especially for water heaters. So really what we assumed to be the area where we can improve on for the single margin source energy code is multifamily water heating, which is a pretty small bucket to pull from, and that's why we get that lower reduction. I guess another opportunity would be a zero NOx requirement. So this is just assuming that starting in 2026, we're going to build all our construction all electric, because we've adopted a zero NOx requirement for all new construction. And this is going to cover that year or so of water heating that gets installed, but also all that space heating, kitchens, and dryers. And under that scenario or that code, that ups our reductions from new construction to 1,700 metric tons by 2030. On the existing building side, we looked at two-way air conditioning requirement. So this is using a heat pump at time of replacing or installing an air conditioner. We assume that this is going to start in 2026 for residential buildings and then 2027 for commercial buildings. Some of the central assumptions are we're assuming 25% of residential buildings have air conditioning. That's kind of a current number. This could be increasing over time. So this number maybe is a little low due to that. We also assumed 50% of commercial buildings have air conditioning. 10% non-compliance rate, you're going to see that's pretty consistent throughout here. I think you can make an argument that this number is a lot higher in the real world, and that permit compliance is not super great. But we also are assuming that if we wanted compliance to be good, we could go out and make that happen. So that's kind of a standard assumption. And then a lot of these replacement models just work on the lifespan of the equipment and the number of pieces of equipment we think are out there. And we assume an 18 to 23 year lifespan for air conditioners. And with all of that, we end up with a 2,222 metric ton reduction in 2030. And that's assuming that when you install this air conditioner that is now also a heater, you're not going to use your gas furnace anymore. So quite a few assumptions in there, but again, kind of gives us a ballpark of the reductions we could expect. The other option is local zero NOx for furnaces. So this is one of the largest reductions that we modeled out of any of our reach codes. We assume that this happens in 2026, large furnaces in 2028, that there's a 10% non-compliance, again, 18 to 23 year lifespan. And because we're capturing a lot of furnaces that are going to be installed over the next, before 2029 and the air district's impact, we have quite a big reduction with 8,253 metric tons. Very similar on the water heater side. This is a local zero NOx just for water heaters. This reduction is a good bit lower because we're really only getting about a year of impact. We are assuming large boilers and heaters would roll in 2027, so that ups this a little bit more. but around 1,500, just under 1,500 metric tons CO2e for water heating. Existing building reach codes point of sale. I'll just point out that this is not something that San Mateo is currently looking at, but we included it for other jurisdictions who might be. This is based on the average per household natural gas consumption, and we used Redfin, which is a real estate website, to find the average number of homes sold over the last 5 years, which was 1,055. We assume that that would happen every year from now till 2030, and that we'd start implementing in 2026. Also, based on our Comstock data and Restock data, 80 to 85% gas appliance use, across all the buildings sold. And when we electrify every building that is supposed to be sold, we get 6,674 metric tons of CO2e reduction. And if we just require a water heater, which is probably more reasonable from a political adoption perspective, we get about 2,000 metric tons, just a bit over. The FlexPath code is one that is a little extra tricky to model because it is so flexible. So it's hard to know which way people are going to go. That's part of the allure of this code, but it also, again, is a little complicated to model. So we assume that this will start in 2026. About 1% of households or buildings, I guess, get renovated per year. And we also assume 32% have solar or heat pump. This is probably a little high. Talking with TRC and Blake more recently, this number might be more like 10 or 15%. And when I did that adjustment, this 700 metric tons goes up to like 900. But essentially what we had to choose is this code traditionally allows homeowners to do several different things, like installing solar, installing a heat pump HVAC, heat pump water heater, or doing energy efficiency. To simplify things, energy efficiency doesn't give very much value. So we just said 10% of people would choose solar, 30% would choose a heat pump HVAC, and 60% would choose a water heater, just based on the cost to implement these different projects. And because some people are going to choose solar, a bunch of people already have either solar or a heat pump, the result is fairly low reduction. Like I said, in this kind of 700 to 900 metric ton, depending on how you massage these assumptions. And then finally, cooking electrification at renovation. This one, we did assume a higher non-compliance rate just because of people's attachment to gas stoves. We assumed the same remodel rate of 1% per year. And then Comstock and Restock pointed to about 74% gas stoves. Actually, this is just residential, so Restock. And the benefits there are about 91 metric tons of CO2e in 2030. But there are other reasons to look at something like this, especially due to the air quality benefits of not having gas combustion inside the home and in the living space. Some of the other codes that cities are looking at, including City of San Mateo, is a building performance standard. We did not model this just because of the timing and the uncertainty around the threshold. So essentially, this is requiring buildings over a certain size, say 50,000 square feet, to come into this building performance standard program. In the first year or two, they would report their natural gas and electricity use or their emissions per square foot. In a future year 2 to 4, they would do retro commissioning, understand the nuances of their building. Commercial buildings have a lot more complicated systems, see what the opportunities are. And then starting in year 3 or 4, you would set a greenhouse gas reduction threshold. Maybe it's around the average of the buildings of that type in your city. And buildings would have to start to make improvements to get to that threshold. But because this timeline kind of puts us out at 2030 and we don't know what these thresholds would be, it's really hard to estimate the emissions benefit. But I did include the total metric tons from commercial natural gas in a city like San Mateo, which was 83,660. So there is a big pot, there's a big pot to pull from here. And this type of code can help unlock savings and reductions in the commercial building stock. It's also really hard to know before you do reporting how much of this 83,000 is captured by, say, a 50,000 square foot threshold for buildings or 20,000 square foot or whatever it may be. And then the last one we also are, keeping in the back of our head, but is a little tricky to model, is a municipal electrification first policy. So the city of San Mateo is also looking at this. They don't have a recent greenhouse gas inventory for their municipal facilities. We don't have access to one. For the RICAPS program, we generate the community inventory every year, so we have that data handy. San Mateo did have a 2005 inventory, and in that year, their facilities used 586 metric tons of gas, or generated 586 metric tons from gas. And we're just assuming that 25% of that could be converted by 2030 for 146 metric tons through this electrification first policy, which is essentially, we're going to aim to install electric appliances when our gas appliances fail. And this chart just gives a little bit of a summary, looking at where our biggest benefits are by building type. So again, that local zero NOx rule for existing furnaces is the biggest greenhouse gas reduction opportunity. It likely also is the most expensive for residents, which is a bit of a trade-off, but that is kind of where the reduction benefit is. Heat pump at point of sale, and obviously full electrification at point of sale, though that is likely very challenging, had pretty high reductions. Two-way AC and local zero NOx rule for new construction actually both did fairly well, kind of in that middle ground. And then flex path and kitchen remodels on the low side. And then very low on the energy performance standard post 2025 Title 24. And yeah, just a couple of takeaways. Again, this is really complicated to model. There's a lot of things that, it's really easy to model, like, hey, you can't install any new gas, or every replacement has to be electric, but that's not what we're working with these days. And the codes provide a lot of flexibility. So we have to make a lot of assumptions on how people are going to react to those codes. But given that, I think this really still gives us a good sense of kind of the order of magnitude reductions we'd expect from each of these codes. Local zero NOx codes are really effective as long as we assume that the permit compliance is going to be reasonable or high. And just a reminder, not all of these codes are going to stack together. So we can't just add all these together to get this big reduction. A lot of them use the same triggers, or this would happen at the same time. So we need to be a little strategic with how we promote these to our cities. And yeah, I think this kind of provides some of the other side of the scale besides just cost, which tends to be the majority of the conversation. This kind of shows us some of the benefits on the emissions reduction side. And with that, I will take any questions you have.
Super quick, just like for kind of understanding these reductions. I did a quick lookup. A car is about 4.6 metric tons per year. Is that a good estimate?
Yeah, I think so. I haven't looked at the EPA emissions calculator in a minute, but that doesn't seem out of control.
Okay, so just as an example, AC to heat pump, if adopted, you're taking about 480 cars off the road that year.
Great.
Robert.
I wanted to make a comment about where this is going to be used, and then I have a question. As many of you know, but to help everybody in this room, the city of San Mateo adopted a policy a couple of years ago, to get rid of natural gas. To adopt policies to get rid of natural gas by the end of 2030. This information will be going to the Senior Advisory Committee next Monday, with the Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission on Wednesday, followed by the Community Relations Commission the following Monday, and then to the City Council on June 16th, using these numbers. This is what we were looking for in San Mateo. So that answers the question a lot of people are going to have. Secondly, what do other cities do now who want to use this model? You know, San Mateo, we're first out of the gate. We're going to be looking at this over the next, as Ryan said, next 6 weeks. What do the other cities do, Ryan, or I just throw that out to everybody here in the room?
Yeah, we've got budget to build these models out for any city in San Mateo County who wants them through the RICAPS program. So as cities need this, we can build it out and kind of help them translate this. We tried to make as user-friendly of a model as possible, but it definitely is helpful to have us build it out and kind of give at least a crash course on what the results look like and what they mean.
Thank you. That was really good news. I didn't know that, really. And thank you for all the work you guys put into this model. I think it's going to serve our purposes. We'll find out next week and see how it works, but I'm very positive that it's going to allow the council. This is what I wanted all along, so that a council member could look at something, a policy decision, and decide what is the best for my city without a lot of asking a lot of questions. The bar charts are a great help. Thank you for doing that. Hopefully we'll see how it goes with our commissions and councils. So some of the commissions, it's going to be brand new. They haven't ever heard of any of this. For the sustainability folks on Wednesday, I understand you're going to be at all of them.
I'll be there.
In person?
In person, yes.
All right. Well, thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Blake, for all you've done on this. I really appreciate it.
I want to do a quick me too. Thank you very much. Robert and I gave heaps and heaps of feedback on this along the way. I think we first talked about this a year ago, right? And I really appreciate all the hard work. This is extremely helpful. So thank you.
Awesome. Glad it works.
Yeah, go ahead.
So is this, a similar presentation going to be given to the board sometime soon?
That's an interesting question. What do you think about that?
That's really a question for Sean. We don't have any plans at this point.
I think this would be a really good presentation for the board members to see. And the other piece of my question is there a plan for taking this presentation to various city councils? Do they have to invite you, or is this being kind of?
Well, that
marketed to them?
wouldn't be done by us. It wouldn't come from us. So city, given city could certainly invite, via RICAPS, bring funds go frequently to do that presentation.
Okay, I guess what I'm trying to get to is how would a city even know to ask for this?
You know, Kathleen, what we can do is share this out through the RICAPS group, and RICAP, we've been talking about it, but we didn't have, I don't think we defined it. It's an acronym for Regional Integrated Climate Action, something or other.
Planning support.
It's a working group of city and county staff, city and county sustainability staff that meets every month, and that hires Ryan as a consultant. So we can make an announcement that to all the city and sustainability staff that this is a variable. And I see Ryan nodding.
Yeah, and it's also tied in with Farhad and his team at TRC. So as cities ask for support on reach codes, they'll just have this tool available to them there as well. So I think that is another trigger where folks will have access to this data.
I'm just concerned that, having gone through the whole reach code process previously, it took a lot of public pressure to even get them to want to consider reach codes. So if they're not thinking about doing reach codes, how are they going to even know to ask for it? So the more it can be pushed out there, the better.
Right. Well, Ryan, are you planning to write this presentation to the RICAPS group?
Yes, we will.
Great. So it'll be presented to all the city staff, or should all the sustainability staff, I should say.
John and Remy?
Couple clarifying questions. all of these assumptions include commercial buildings, right?
They do, yes.
Okay, and then on the AC to heat pump, you mentioned that 25% of residential buildings have AC, 50% of commercial. In your assumptions, are you assuming that only like a failure rate for the existing AC systems? And then that's how many heat pumps would have to be? Are you also factoring in people that are gonna get AC for the first time? No.
No. So that's, I mentioned, I think briefly, like there may be more people, like we think that AC
Yeah.
adoption is increasing, it's getting hotter, it's more common. We could tweak those numbers. It would definitely increase that a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. And then just a pie in the sky request, like maybe down the road that this also includes cost savings to communities in terms of like health costs. I don't know if there's a way to maybe incorporate that, because that might influence council as well to make the most
Yeah.
impactful decision.
I think we could at least come up with a air quality savings number based on the natural gas avoided. It gets hard to put a health cost on that. Then there's definitely, factors to do that, but it gets a little more difficult to pin down confidently, I think.
I think the air district estimated health savings in their rules, so maybe they might have the resource.
Yeah, that's a great point. I can take a look and see.
Thank you for this work. I mean,
Oh, fantastic report. And just thinking, Pacifica just got done with its climate action plan, so this would be very helpful, for those cities who have done to make sure it's updated. I did have a few questions. Berkeley, when put out a kind of a no gas policy, and it got rejected in the court. So I'm just wondering, that's been accounted for this?
Yes, that's one of the reasons why we have to make so many assumptions is that the new codes that we're using, you can't ban natural gas appliances because the court found that supersedes EPCA, which is the Federal Appliance Efficiency Standard. So a lot of the new codes either look at air quality emissions, like the zero NOx codes, or they provide a flexible pathway. So you still could, all of these codes, gas could still be included. And the challenging part for us was trying to find like, what was the expected rate of electrification because of these codes. So that's the piece that gets tricky, but it was accounted for, and all the codes that we looked at are assumed to be EPCA compliant.
Okay, and then there was a thing that jumped out about multifamily. Was that, I'm an architect who did a lot of multifamily. And, we found out when I was working with a developer is it's actually cheaper not to install the gas when you're doing a new project, right? You don't have to deal with PG&E in that second service. You don't have to install the infrastructure throughout the building. So I'm just wondering, your numbers, are those new construction, which are probably all going to be all electric, which is a cost is less to the developer, or this is taking that existing stock of multifamilies and converting them to electric, which is a more expensive proposition because you got existing gas and gas infrastructure.
Yeah, it's both. So the first couple of codes we talked about are for new construction, and yeah, it is less expensive to build all electric because you don't have to install that gas infrastructure. So that's great. We do assume that some buildings will still be built with gas, just to be a little conservative. I think you're right. The numbers are probably gonna be pretty high all electric. And then the rest of the codes we talked about after the first two or so were all for existing buildings, where the proposition is a little more challenging, but it does look at kind of time of replacement and particular trigger points that are most cost effective.
Great, and I want to see public comment, but I also think if any of us want to solicit this for our cities, if we talk to our councils, should we refer them to you, Ryan? Is that a good step if we have further questions?
Yeah, that's fine. I'm here to help, and through the RICAPS program, I'm able to help out any city in San Mateo.
Fantastic. Thank you. Is there any public comments?
Please raise your hand if you would like to make a public comment. I'm not seeing any online.
All right, any other comments here? I want to thank you. That was, this isn't your thing, but we've been waiting for this for a long time and we love it. And it's very, very useful for many of us and we really appreciate it. John, real quick.
Super quick, now that you've had this model, how much time will it take you to do it for another city?
Should go pretty quick, as long as we're not super busy. It usually only takes a couple of days or so.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to go on to marketing and community liaison updates from
I have a
Kirsten.
question. What's the next step then? Cities will start asking. We should come back to this about, is it gonna go to the board? What are we gonna do? How do you want to handle that?
Let's bring it up in the future topics thing, because I don't know, but we'll figure something out. I want to handle it somehow. All right, go ahead.
Okay, gotcha.
Great. And Robert, I made a note in our agenda planning document that I will bring it up at our next board meeting, agenda planning meeting.
I love it.
And I will be reporting to the board on what happened at this meeting, so there's that too.
I think I might come too. Thank you. That answers my question. Appreciate it.
Okay, super quick. Lots of new web pages on the website for our home upgrade program, which is completely open now. And we have, more than a dozen new web pages to support that. So dig in on the website. It's cool. It's awesome. It's even cooler. Dig in. E-bike program is open. $1,000 rebate, income qualified. You need to be registered in the Carafera program. And which is and if you qualify for the Carafera program, you should sign up for that anyway. And we used to offer that, for like a limited time. Now it's open throughout the whole year. So great program for renters. And also thank you everybody for helping out on Earth Day outreach and for everybody who was involved in outreach in April. That's all I've got.
Any public comment
No public
online?
comments.
All right, great. Thank you. Next, our working group reports. Does anyone want to, please, Robert, go ahead.
I'm gonna report on the strategic planning working group. We met on April 17th. From PCE was Shalini Schwaber and Nellie Wilberg. From La Piana Consulting was Lester Olmsted. And for the CAC working group was myself, Kathleen Goforth, Remy Tan, Michael Fawson, and John McKenna. Lester Olmsted Rose presented the most recent draft updated proposed strategy roadmap, including options for revised mission and vision statements. He described the process for moving forward for adoption, including PCE board input in May, and then PCE staff development of agency goals over the summer, building to final approval of the strategic plan in October 2025. There was consensus among the CAC working group members that the mission and vision statements should include words that more directly refer to climate change and greenhouse gas elimination. Working group members also suggested that PCE messaging include language that resonates well with our customers, such as health, cost savings, air quality, and emissions reduction. And there was consensus finally among the working group that the role of all committees and working groups, especially the CAC, should be considered in the upcoming strategic planning discussion and recommendations. We deeply appreciate being part of PCE's strategic planning process, and we look forward to being active participants between now and October. That is my report, and I'm going to hit send in a few seconds, and I'll send it to you.
Anybody else?
I guess a real quick update, the Building Electrification Programs Working Group, we meet regularly with Raphael, get updates on program uptake. I would say the home upgrade program is moving slower than we'd like. So, get the word out, tell your council members, your community members about the program. Try to get some more participants in that. And then there is a opportunity, sort of in line with the REACH codes discussion we have, there's an opportunity for elected officials to attend a meeting on May 29th, I believe, to learn about all the REACH code options that are available this year. So encourage your electeds to attend that meeting. That's a joint PCE and SBCE meeting.
Can I make a quick comment on that? Because it's from the Earth Fair too. My new strategy has been telling people to get bids and get involved, even if they don't want to do it, if you're not thinking about it. So they can at least see what the options are. So when they are ready to do it, is that a fair thing to be recommending or you don't like that?
You mean going through the turnkey program to just get.
Not necessarily a turkey program, but to get on PC, look what an option is and
Oh.
potentially, I mean, I wasn't pushing that yet, but
Right,
just the
well, you
idea.
can certainly go to the website to get oriented if, and that certainly makes sense. Just, you know, a little tweak to John's comments on the low uptake on home upgrade. It's actually because we're not actually actively marketing it yet. It's on the website, but we're not actively, because we're dealing with some operational issues that we're still working through with Franklin. The turnaround time for customers haven't been great. And so we're trying to work through some startup shakeout problems.
Another working group?
On transportation, just a quick one, as you know, about the e-bikes that one's rolling out, we talked briefly about that, and then went through the kind of talking points about the EVs for the concierge people. So that was a very good conversation, a lot of great input on that group. So Carla should be, rolling that out shortly to the staff. And we did comment on some of the website stuff, so that should be feeding back to Carlos and Rose.
And Cheryl here, but we've met, it'll be good on the other group, so we'll do more on that later. Okay, is there any public comment?
No.
Okay, great, thank you. The next thing is upcoming topics for discussion. And look, you want to start that?
Sure.
Okay.
Start that off. Now I know that you all have expressed a lot of interest in banking, so I have an update on banking. Banking on PCE's banking relationships and whether we bank with a company with a bank that invests in fossil fuels. And so I asked our CFO, and he said that we're going to be issuing an RFP for banking services later this year. And he can brief you all at that point. It's not happening yet, but he is very aware that the CAC wants us to consider a bank support of whether a bank supports fossil fuels in the RFPs. He's very clear on this. I've repeated it many times. And that he will, they will include that as a part of the element of the RFP. But he's not, he says there's nothing more to say at this point. He heard you, he's going to put it in the RFP, and when they're further along the process, he's happy to come speak.
And can I just add, so because Raphael mentioned earlier that maybe a possibility to do some banking with another bank, maybe it's just kind of policy that we always look at whoever we're going to bank with to see if they are financing the fossil fuel industry.
Okay,
Like
yeah.
River City Bank, for example. I don't know.
Yeah, so certainly you could bring it up as a future item to make a formal recommendation on that.
Great, yeah, and we could do that even without staff if we wanted to get
Yeah.
it going sooner too.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
cool. The vacation. option.
Yes, exactly. So the board is opting to not do any public meetings in July. And a lot of cities and so on do this. They take one of the months of summer off so people can take their vacations. So the board is not doing any meetings in July. Wanted to give the CAC the same option if you want to take July off.
Second. Before we do that, I want to impact it and we would then be loading June and August, because we lose that month. That's my pitch to not second it. But I think we could take a simple vote and just raise hands, and if the majority doesn't want to do it, we don't meet. Or Steve can vote twice if he really wants to.
Well, I think it depends on what issues are coming up.
Right.
That's why I wanted to bring that up first, and we can decide this at the end, yeah.
Right. There isn't not a lot coming up on the board agenda for June that's customer facing, and that's kind of what I look at when I look ahead. It's what coming up with the board. I look at what's customer facing, because that's what we've committed to bring to you all. What's coming up in June for the board?
June or July?
June 1st for the upcoming meeting.
Oh.
The June meeting, yeah. Well, okay, customer facing rates, an update on rates. As you know, PG&E usually adjust their rates every 6 months, and sometimes we often follow suit. So So actually rates, that's big. Okay, then, there may be items around Caltrain rates, that's very kind of specific to their business. There may be a power, a power purchase agreement. That's kind of,
What about the strategic planning?
that's not coming in June,
Okay.
yeah. And yeah. Rates, but not a whole lot else that's
Well,
customer facing.
There's an issue, and I'm not sure whether it's still even relevant now, the issue of SD 540, which was a very controversial issue, which I don't believe our committee really had a chance to discuss. I don't even know it's even relevant to discuss it anymore. I don't, did the board finalize approval of that? See, there are two issues here. Is it worth us talking about that particular bill? And how come we missed that? It was a very
What was the bill? 540?
It's the one that would take control of our electric. It would require California to be part of a wider network of electricity suppliers throughout the West.
Oh, okay, this was sponsored by one of our local.
Becker.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Council.
It's sponsored by Becker, but it's very,
Yeah.
but many environmental organizations opposed to this. Because in theory, it would enable coal-fired electricity to start coming into California.
Oh, it's interesting, because Becker says it's the opposite, you know.
Well, anyhow,
the
I
green
can't
energy
recap it.
outside,
We can't recap
so
the,
My
debate
point
right
is
now.
there
seems to be a
were
double
hundreds,
edged.
literally hundreds of organizations opposed to this.
Are you moving that we put this on a future agenda?
I don't know whether it's worth putting on the deal.
Well, what's the status of the bill?
I
Is it
think,
gonna die?
There's two things,
And
what's the
it's a
status of the
non-issue.
bill, but what's the status of Municipal Clean Energy in addressing the bill?
yeah, I think we can talk about putting it on the agenda, and I also think at the beginning, I don't know if you were here yet, I mentioned that if you go look at the board meeting for the big board 2 weeks ago, they had two speakers representing both sides.
Right.
Look at, watch that video.
I
yeah, I
sat
saw
in
it.
on that board meeting, it was very interesting.
Right.
But I don't know whether it's still worth our committee discussing it or not. But there's a larger issue, which we missed it. And I think it's too bad we missed it. I think it's a, but.
What do you mean you missed it? Because I think we sent an announcement to all the CAC members that it was happening.
Well, yeah.
Well,
I did see
I
that.
personally missed it. We didn't talk
Yeah, I
about
saw
it in the.
Yeah,
We didn't
not
have it on our
really.
agenda. And I'm wondering whether it's not appropriate for us to discuss legislation that affects Municipal Clean Energy. I think it is.
Yeah.
But we rarely do that. We rarely talk
Right,
about
I'll tell
legis-
you why is because, you know, back a few years ago, you remember this, Michael, when we had I think a working group on the functioning of the CAC, and we updated our you know, our agreements of what we bring to the CAC. The criteria is things that are customer facing. And so whether we have a regional grid or a California grid is really like in the weeds of energy policy. We don't consider it to be customer facing. So I didn't bring it to the CAC.
Wow, so we're not supposed to talk about customer facing things. This could affect the source of the electricity that we're providing customers. We might have to change our website to say that we don't avoid greenhouse gas emissions, you know, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, we have at this point we don't have a lot on our agenda for June. I mean, we could potentially bring that item if you would like to. The thing is, we can't recreate that fabulous debate
Oh, I
that
know,
happened
yeah, I
at the
know.
board
No,
meeting.
I think we
Like
do
we
it
had two guest
internally,
speakers who were super informative. The best way to really inform yourself is to go back and watch the video of that board meeting, but we
No,
can't recreate
I
that.
listened to the board meeting. I'm
Okay,
just
good.
wondering, there's this committee, and maybe it's not appropriate, maybe this committee should not comment on something like that. It was one of the most controversial issues I've seen statewide.
I think I would be happy to have it be on our agenda to discuss it. And again, one of our missions is to advise on high-level legislative and regulatory direction of the organization. So I do think, not get in the weeds, but I think we should talk about it, especially if people are still interested. I just don't know where it'll be a month from now.
Right, I don't know either.
We could put it on the agenda tentatively and figure that out.
Yeah, I'd be willing to prepare a little presentation trying to present actually both sides of it, because it is big. You know, there's some good arguments where it should be done.
I
I'd
mean,
have to
the-
work with somebody else.
Yeah,
to
I
put
mean,
something together.
but you know, as Kristen was saying, it's ship sailed, you know, we can just listen to the recording of that board meeting, right? is what was.
We could do that
But
too.
I think the more important thing that Michael's bringing up that, this is an item that I think staff assumed was not customer facing, but I think it is customer facing because if there is dirty energy coming, it makes actually a better
Right.
case for what the Eco
Right.
100, the higher level
Right.
Yeah.
of thing here. So this is all very relevant to the customers. So just kind of.
Wanted
That's
to clarify, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the intention of that at the board meeting was study session, and so
Yeah.
the board didn't make a formal
There's nothing done
vote.
yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, would it be, if Remy's willing, I'd be willing to sit down with him and present it, make a little presentation to the board, and there's the committee at the next meeting. Just so people are well informed about the issue. We may not want to make a recommendation to the,
I think that's
to the
great.
board.
Sure.
Yeah.
Do that.
And then we have the recording, everybody can listen
Yeah,
to
right,
beforehand.
right.
And it'll be
Yeah,
just kind of a
We
quick.
can send out
synopsis.
that recording, the
Yeah.
board recording too, because it was,
Yeah, to make sure.
there was a
everybody's
pro
got
and con.
Yes,
of it,
great.
Yeah, I
I
was.
just want to make a point of clarification on this issue. That bill is not on expedited order, it's on regular order, so it's not gonna happen, I don't think, between now and the next meeting, just to answer questions somebody had earlier. The same came up yesterday in the meeting, John and I ran, maybe one of me. It's not expedited, it's on regular order, which means they can.
And similar bills failed 3 or 4 times. I remember reading that part on the email.
Because
So
our-
because California was afraid of just what you say,
Right,
seceding.
but our
control.
wonderful state
We
senator
can't recap that. We can't recap the whole debate right
endorsed
now.
it,
It's
introduced the
also
bill.
9:10.
This is
Yeah.
Jen, just to make sure we focus here on the agenda as it is. We're gonna have to move on and we can agendize this for next meeting, but we shouldn't have any further discussion on it, please.
Are there any
I will
other
add it
upcoming
to next month's
topics
agenda.
for
Okay,
discussion?
great.
Yeah, go ahead, Harry.
Yeah, I'd like to bring up this stuff about the electrification and the needs for upgrading panels.
I have.
Because this came up on a project that was very real to me. I'm doing a lot of, single family residential upgrades and, having an engineer just telling in my face that he can't make a 200 amp panel work. And he's done like taken a 40% of all the total appliances on that house in the ADU. And he still couldn't get it to work. And he said, that's the code. And that was kind of the end of the conversation with that engineer. And it didn't sit
So it
well.
sounds
with-
like you have a recommendation about a future agenda item.
About doing upgrades, yeah.
Yeah, and I'd like to get some, really cutting edge expert in so that I'm armed and you
Tom
all,
Cabot.
what?
Get Tom Cabot. He's there.
Yeah, whoever we can get, that's leading edge.
Great.
I'd love that.
And then that could be in the record, and it could be a resource, maybe on the PC website.
PC already has a whole resource on how to avoid panel upgrades.
Right. But it's also how to fight your engineer on that. It was using conservative.
I'd encourage you to look
code.
at what's on the website.
Yeah.
Is there any
Best.
public comment, on anything anybody wants to have in a future topic?
No.
Okay, are there any committee member reports?
We just did that?
No, that was the working agenda reports. This is committee member reports. We never have any, so don't have any. We're good.
Oh,
Okay, public comment on that.
No.
All right, I'm sorry, guys, we're 12 minutes past 9.
It's not too bad.
But I thought it was a great productive meeting. I'm very thrilled with everything we got through here. Share this widely with your networks and we'll see you next. Oh, wait, we didn't decide about July. What do we?
Oh, that's
We're
right.
all in
July. Are we
favor
meeting
of
in
not
July?
having a meeting in July. Raise your
I'm
hand.
still not clear, Kirsten, if there's like burning stuff between June and then in August. Because if August is full, we might want to divide and.
We don't know.
This is Jen. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I do believe it is a decision that there is no meeting in July and we don't have anything agendized to vote on this. So it's more informative than anything else.
Yes, thank you,
We'll have to
Shannon.
bring it back for a vote at the next meeting, June meeting.
No, there's no meeting in July, is what I heard.
Well, wait, I thought it was presented to me that we were going to be deciding to whether we're meeting in July.
Right.
She said it's more informative, there's no.
Okay, so we'll do it in June. On
We will-
June's meeting, we'll deal with that.
Right.
That makes
Okay.
sense. We'll have a better
Alright, got it.
conversation on that.
Okay,
Okay, good. I think we're done.
Thank
good night,
you.
thank you.
Thanks,
Good night.
everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.